TikTok time to rock. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's watching from all over the world. Your friendly neighborhood philosophers here.
Mm-hmm.
D Wood and IP.
Sure.
How you doing, man? How you doing?
Doing good. How about you?
Pretty good day after seeing Malik, who's done nothing but lose his entire life, every stage. All of a sudden became a winner. Started crushing people on the Islamic dilemma. Wild stuff. Wild stuff.
About time. About time. But yeah.
So what's been going on, man?
Well, you had the bright idea of having 2026 go through the whole idea of debunking the nonsense of Muhammad in the Bible, and then I had the bright idea of volunteering to go through the book. Their main book they use to show Muhammad in the Bible is Abraham Fulfilled, and I thoroughly regret that because this book was incredibly awful in so many ways. And I'm just like, you might think I'm being hyperbolic. Wait till you see when we get into this, because they will do things like they will, on like page 14, they'll quote like Genesis. They'll quote a passage from Genesis, and I'm like, well, you can't trust this part. It's unreliable. And then like 20 pages later, they're quoting it and like using it as authoritative. Like, that's the kind of stuff in this book. There are so many problems. I can't even cover them all today because it's that bad of a book. It's like no one thought to proofread this or get it peer reviewed, because if they did, this would never have passed.
Let me see if I can look up a picture of that real quick. Abraham Fulfilled.
Yeah. For those who don't know, this is a book came out a couple years ago. It's been the Muslims' go-to book to argue Muhammad is in the Bible. It has 3 authors. Rashid, Hussein, and then the guy that runs the YouTube channel, Many Prophets, One Message. I believe his name is Abu, for example. It's on the cover. And so these are the 3 guys that wrote this book. They said they spent about half a decade writing it. And when we get into it, you're going to be like, wait a minute. It's 3 authors and almost 5 years of research, and this is what they did. It's bad, man. So there's many chapters. They'll go through this passage. The first one's on like Genesis 17. Then they go to Deuteronomy 18:18, Deuteronomy 33. They do Isaiah 42 as well. The whole paraclete thing in John is towards the end, and they just try to show Muhammad is prophesied in the Bible, and it's what Muslims have been basically using for the past couple years. Is that this book here? This is the book they have been using for the past couple years to argue that the Bible prophesies Muhammad. And so a lot of the arguments you've been interacting with online have come from this book, and you may not have even realized it.
I believe I read some of this book. See if this sounds familiar, because I think I read some of this on a particular topic. In their section on John 14, about the paraclete, did they start babbling about Rudolf Bultmann and him saying that the paraclete originally was not the Holy Spirit? Is that where I saw this?
Yeah, that is. I believe that is mentioned in here, but they don't really go too much into that. I know Bultmann is mentioned, but I don't think that's actually where that comes from. They do go into the paraclete stuff, but no, I don't think that argument is specifically in here. I can do a quick search. Actually, no, I'm not seeing Bultmann's name a lot. So no, that one surprisingly didn't come from this book, but
wait,
a lot of other bad
arguments. You said not
did.
seeing it much. What does it come up as?
Well, they mentioned Rudolf Bultmann a couple times is what I mean.
No, I mean, do they mention it? Do they mention it in John 14, that section?
No, they don't.
No?
Not surprisingly, no, they did not make the argument that it's the spirit of that. You said it's the spirit of Jesus, or it's Bultmann saying it's not the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of where I saw that. I thought it was from here, but I'm trying to think of where else it would be if it wasn't from here, because I don't remember reading anything else. But yeah, I saw someone gave the argument and said, which is the overall pattern. They'll take something that some scholar said and twist it to some sort of advantage. But whoever I was reading was saying Bultmann and several others claimed that the Paraclete was not originally the Holy Spirit. It was someone else. And then they run and say, you see, they were expecting a prophet. They were expecting another prophet after Jesus, when what Bultmann and those guys actually said was they believe that originally Jesus was promising to send his own spirit and not the Holy Spirit as a distinct person. And so it was, but they left that out. It was just, he said it's not the Holy Spirit, and then they went on to something else. But yeah, I'll have to figure out where that was.
They do similar stuff like that. Like
they do that all
try
the
to say
time.
the Paraclete could be a human, and like they cite the assumption of Moses, take that out of context. They cite a couple other scholars to take out of context, and then they just butcher John on that whole section. They're just like, yeah, well, we're going to cut out this part, we're going to cut out that part. We'll get into that. I'll show you how their methodology. It's wow. I can't believe they even admitted it in the book that they were doing this.
And it is really interesting. The overall, what I see overall from Muslims over the past several years is, if you go back like 20 years, they were still just saying, hey, Muhammad's mentioned, Muhammad is obviously the prophet like Moses in Deuteronomy 18. Who else could this be? Muhammad was very much like Moses, and Jesus wasn't. So this must be about Muhammad. And Song of Solomon 5:16, and same thing with the Paraclete in John 14. Hey, that doesn't make sense. This is talking about the Holy Spirit. It must be talking about Muhammad. And they'd keep doing that until we just kept destroying them on these arguments. And then it switched to, instead of just going to John 14 and saying, here's why this is Muhammad, it would be, we'll find this church father who said this, and then we'll twist that and combine it with what this German scholar said at this point. And they'll connect all these weird things and then say, therefore Muhammad, even though no one in there would have thought anything about Muhammad. No one was saying anything about Muhammad. They just piece these weird, obscure things all together, and they say, therefore Muhammad. And it's like, that kind of destroys the argument, because the claim is we open up the Bible and find Muhammad mentioned. And it's like, and say anything about, well, if you go to, this German scholar that no one's ever heard of and combine it with this and then toss in that and do what this said and blah, 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 and then you'll somehow be able to do some gymnastics and conclude this is actually about Muhammad.
Yeah, that's what they do a lot in this book. They'll quote some obscure rabbi, or they'll quote like Moses Maimonides, and then they'll be like, "Well, that he said this, and then Martin Luther said this, and then this author in the 1800s said this. Therefore, Muhammad is in the Bible." I cannot how many times I'm reading this, and I'm like, just watching them quote outdated scholarship. They're like, Adam Clark said, I'm like, Adam Clark, what? Like, who's citing Adam Clark today? Like, if Mike Licona published a book and his main source was Adam Clark and the, like Benson or Pulpit's commentary, like, he'd be laughed at. Like, but that's the kind of stuff they're doing. They're citing very outdated scholarship. Like, the prophecy in Isaiah 11:1 about the root shall come from Jesse. You know what they say in this book? They say that's Ishmael. They say Jesse is a short version of the name Ishmael. Now, when I read that, it took me 5 minutes to debunk that. It was originally thought that was the shorter version of the name Ishmael over in the 1800s, like over 100 years ago. But like modern scholarship has debunked that. Like, no, Jesse is not connected to the name Ishmael. We know that. But it's like they found somebody saying it 100 years ago. All right, now it's a fact, and we're just going to put it in the book, and we're not going to check what modern scholars have said, which have thoroughly debunked that connection and have moved on. So that's the kind of stuff they do in this book. They're not doing scholarship. They're looking for sources, and if they find something that agrees with them, they just assume it's true. Doesn't matter if it's been debunked, if it's outdated, they just throw it in the book. And sometimes they even quote sources that disagree with them. Like, they'll be like, this source says this, and then I went and checked, and it didn't say that. It said like the opposite.
Hey, I hate to refute you so brutally, but I just looked it up in your face. They do bring up Bultmann in the section on the Paraclete. Now watch what they do. So this is on page 309. It says, the Bible scholar Raymond Brown mentioned a list of renowned scholars who believed Paraclete was originally a human figure which was later confused with the Holy Spirit. So, a human figure. Watch this. And then he quotes, they quote Raymond Brown.
Oh, yeah, they don't say Boltman says it. They said Raymond Brown. They mention him below in the paragraph.
It's Boltman. It's Boltman as people who defend this view. But listen to this. And so it says in 5 passages in John. There's a quotation from Raymond Brown. In 5 passages in John, the title Parakletos is given to someone who is not Jesus, nor an intercessor, nor in heaven. Christian tradition has identified this figure as the Holy Spirit, because that's what the passage says, but scholars like Spida, Delafosse, Windisch, Sasse, and Boltmann and Betts have doubted whether this identification is true to the original picture and have suggested that the Paraclete was once an independent salvific figure, later confused with the Holy Spirit. So they quote this passage from Raymond Brown saying that Boltmann and a few other scholars who no one agrees with now, they say Boltmann claimed that the Paraclete was not originally the Holy Spirit, but was an independent salvific figure. Now look at what they say in follow-up. They say,
"See, you said Bolt. If you would have said Raymond Brown, that'd have been different. But you said Boltman, and so that's why I was a little confused."
I'm not attacking you, man. I'm not attacking you.
I'm just saying.
And then they say, in response, they say, this understanding of the Paraclete as a human figure is also reinforced by early church interpretation. So they cite this quotation from Raymond Brown about Boltmann claiming that the Paraclete was not the Holy Spirit, but was originally someone else. And they say, this understanding of the Paraclete as a human figure. Well, if you look at what Boltmann actually said, they said that Jesus was talking about going away and then sending his own spirit. He's going to go away and send his own spirit. So notice they cite Boltmann and these other guys as agreeing, it's not the Holy Spirit. It's about some prophet who's coming. When you look at what they actually say, and you can't believe that the Paraclete is Jesus sending his own spirit after he ascends, Jesus sending his own spirit, and then say, oh yeah, see, they agreed that it's just a human and that it must be Muhammad. And that's what I mean. That seems to be the characteristic. It's just take something, twist it for their case, knowing that none of their readers is going to know what Boltmann said on this. And so they're just going to go, wow, even Christian scholars have acknowledged it's another human being coming after Jesus. Who could that be? It must be Muhammad. And what they actually said would completely destroy their position. And so they never actually show what these guys say. Very, very deceptive.
Yeah. It's very much like that. And they do a whole section trying to show the Holy Spirit is really a human. That's why they quote, they try to go to the assumption of Moses and claim that the assumption of Moses claims the Holy Spirit is a human figure. And it's like, no, that's not what it's saying. That's based on very outdated translations. But that's the kind of stuff they're doing in this book, is they're doing that kind of stuff. Very deceptive with those kind of things. And so, but this is all over. And right after that, they quote Origen. Like right after that, you just mentioned they quote Origen. And they say for example, the church father Origen's disciples believe that Paul of Tarsus was the Paraclete. But I mean, that's like who? Like Origen didn't think that. And so I put a quote in there from Origen in his own work where he identifies the Paraclete as the Holy Spirit. So it's like, who cares about, like, who are you talking about? And by the way, these are disciples of Origen. Well, what about what Origen thought? I mean, so they do that kind of stuff as well. And you're very much like confused as to where they're getting this stuff from. So sometimes I'd spend like a couple days, like just going through a couple pages, trying to track down sources. Sometimes I couldn't even find them. Like they were so obscure, it was hard to even find.
Can we say that we strongly suspect that whoever's writing this would have to know that they're being deceptive? In other words, if you were actually checking out Boltmann or something like that, and you were to see him saying, hey, the Paraclete wasn't originally the Holy Spirit, it was the Spirit of Jesus. And you say, see, he's saying it's going to be another prophet after Jesus. Can we say these guys know that they're being deceptive and that they obviously just believe they're justified because, hey, if we have to make up a bunch of stuff and dupe people into believing Islam, hey, it's still good because we're getting them on the right side of things, even if it's with our deception? That's what it seems like to me.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. It's hard to really say because again, they make a lot of dumb mistakes too, like as I said about misquoting and that kind of thing. So I'd say it's probably a mix of both, if you want my honest opinion. So yeah, I don't know, man. But if you want to start getting into it, we can play that video first. I mean, there's so much we could cover in this, but I want to cover the stuff on Daniel for sure, and as well as the stuff on Deuteronomy 18, because that's what I went back and reread my notes on that today, just because I was like, yeah, these are the two sections that we should cover.
Hang on one second. Looks like we've got some fans of the book here. Look at what we have here. The Spirit of Truth is equivalent in Hebrew to Ruach Ehmet. Ehmet is Ahmed in Arabic.
What? No.
Ruach, meaning spirit, is used in the Bible for prophets metaphorically.
What? Ekmet? Like, this is the phonic fallacy right here. It sounds like Ahmed. Therefore, and by the way, the New Testament was written in Greek. What sort of argument is this? Like, the New Testament's in Greek.
And Jesus, in the exact same chapter, says he's talking about the Holy Spirit. And if you look at every single thing he says about the Paraclete, it does not match up even slightly with Muhammad, nor can it possibly be Muhammad. But even if you wanted to say it's Muhammad, that would make Jesus Allah, because in chapter 16, verse 7 of the Gospel of John, Jesus says he's the one who's sending the Paraclete. And so if you're a Muslim and you believe that Muhammad was sent by Allah and the Paraclete is sent by Jesus.
The weird thing of what they'll do is to get around that, and we'll get into this, is that they will just say that those are the unreliable parts. This is a very common thing they go throughout the book. They'll say like this one passage in Genesis 17 points to Muhammad. And then like a couple pages later, they'll be like, yeah, but this other section that would debunk our whole argument, that was added later. Like, you can't trust this part. And then they'll do the same thing throughout the Bible. So when they get to the chapter on John, they're cutting out, like, it's like they took a pair of scissors to the Gospel of John. They just cut out whatever they want.
Yeah. Wait, is this guy seriously spamming this over and over again? Dude, I literally just put it on the screen. Dude. I just put it on this. I put it on the screen and we've been discussing it and you're spamming the same thing. Stop it right now. I'm giving you a warning. We'd be happy to interact. Especially if this is your level of argumentation, we'd be happy to actually take a look at the passage. Stop the nonsense here.
I have never heard anyone say Ehmet is Ahmed. I mean, like,
hey, look at here. Curious Philosophy says, also this Muslim lied. He is changing Emet to Ehmet trying to fit Ahmed into it. Truth in Hebrew is not Ehmet, it's Emet.
Yeah.
And so
what a shocker.
Yeah.
Always
shocker.
lies, man.
Yeah. And they love to just twist names and stuff like this and apply the phonic fallacy and stuff. It's pretty embarrassing. But it's just like, what do you do? What do you do with compulsive liars who will say absolutely anything and make up anything to defend their religion and then take advantage of people's willingness to gullibly believe them? Guys, it's just a rule. If you're talking to Dawah guys, you have to look up everything they say because they are chronic compulsive liars. I've never seen in my life people who lie as freely with as little concern for any sort of consequences as Dawah guys. I've been to prison, guys. I spent years in prison. I never once met a liar who lies as freely and obviously as these guys. They don't care because there are no consequences or repercussions from their own community. Their community loves lies. You can expose them on 1,000 lies, indisputable, and their fans would have zero problem with it. That's just what Dawah has done to people.
By the way, they do this in the book. Like, if you go to page 10 and 11, like they're talking about Ishmael, and they think a covenant is supposed to come through Ishmael. And they say the respected Bible commentary, the International Critical Commentary, points out that Ishmael's circumcision is inconsistent with the claim that he's excluded from God's covenant. Then they quote the book. They say the circumcision of Ishmael, however, is inconsistent with the theory that the rite is a sign of the covenant from which Ishmael is excluded. Well, so I go look that up. And it's a commentary from the 1800s. So immediately you're like, this is outdated, the International Critical Commentary. But then I went and read a little bit of it. And on page 295 of it, they say, the heir of the covenant, okay, the promise of the birth of Isaac is brought into connection with the main idea of the chapter by the assurance that the covenant is to be established with him and not with Ishmael. Okay? Then right on the very next page, 296, they say Ishmael is to be endowed for Abraham's sake with every kind of blessing, except the religious privileges of the covenant. So they quote mine this commentary from the 1800s, and they excluded the parts where it explicitly says Ishmael is not going to have some sort of covenant through him in any religious sense. But they found a quote they can quote mine, take right out of context and use. That's what they do throughout this book over and over again. It's like that.
So you're saying, which notice it's exactly what they used to do with the Bible, right? They go to a verse where if you read the verses that come before it or the verses that come after it, completely destroys any idea of Islam being true or of Muhammad being a prophet. But they go to that verse, ignore everything else, twist it into saying something about Muhammad, and then say, you see, until people started catching on to what they were doing and demanding that they read them in context. And now that people have caught on, they can't use those arguments as well anymore. So now what do? It's like it's this game where they're just going to quote mine various commentaries from the 1800s and a German scholar who said this, a church father who said that. Mm-hmm. You look at what the person, the church father, the scholar, whoever it is, if you look at what they're actually saying, it could never in a trillion years be used to defend the idea that Muhammad is the prophet. They'll take a quote out of it, completely just obliterate the context and build their case, knowing that they're making it kind of harder for regular people to go refute the stuff. If you're just saying, hey, look, the Bible says this, it's kind of easy for a person to read the passage. If you say, oh, this guy said this, and that guy said this, and this 18th century commentary said this, and so on. Now it's, oh, okay, maybe we'll just trust them on this because we don't want to do the difficult work of looking it up. Well, guess what, guys? We're going to look it all up this year. We're going to go through all of it all year long until hopefully people catch on. You can't trust anything these guys say. I'm not talking about Muslims. There are Muslims you can trust who aren't constantly lying to you. When it comes to Dawah guys and their fans, biggest bunch of liars the world has ever seen. And it's not even close. All right, so did you want to start off with their little video?
Yeah, let's play their little video because they heard we were going to do this and they started to panic, and so they put this video out. One of the authors of this book put this video out.
Let's take the first couple of super chats real quick, then we'll play this video. I didn't watch the video, but I went to all the places that had their version of music or sound effects in there, just in case that's copyrighted stuff. I don't know, but it wasn't part of the content. So we'll see what they actually say. From last live of Malik versus Jake, Malik found the Injil too. He just called the Gospel of Matthew the Injil. It had to be AI, or maybe he did pass the MCAT and Islam diluted his brain. Don't know, but man, Malik was crushing it in that debate. Unrelated question. Did the ancient Israelites have a concept of the Trinity? Were they strict Unitarians? In Genesis, God says, us and our image. Good stuff there.
Yeah, you can go to places like Genesis 19:24, where it says Yahweh rained fire and sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from Yahweh out of heaven. So you have two Yahwehs. Go to places like Exodus 23, where God is speaking, and he says, I'm going to send a messenger before you. And then in verse 25, so Exodus 23:25, he calls the messenger Yahweh. So Yahweh is calling his messenger Yahweh. You go to places like Exodus 3, where the angel of Yahweh appears in the burning bush, and then it says Yahweh spoke from the bush. Or you go to places like Joshua 5-6, where Joshua is before Jericho, and it says the commander of the armies of Yahweh appeared before him, and then says, take the sandals off your feet, for where you stand is holy ground. Then in the next chapter, it says Yahweh speaks to him. So this guy, who is the commander of Yahweh's army, is identifying himself as Yahweh. So you got to read those 2 chapters in context there. So yeah, there's lots of places. And so yeah, it was very much this idea that early on there was this concept of a multi-personal God. Yahweh was multi-personal. It shows up as the 2 powers in heaven theology. And even Jewish scholars like Benjamin Sommers, Alan Siegel, Daniel Bourrier have pointed this out, that you definitely see this. And then it's only the later rabbinic reinterpretations that make Judaism more Unitarian. But so actually Christianity is the most consistent with the Hebrew scriptures, not Islam or Talmudic Judaism.
Yeah, and so I mean, yeah, I've seen it put that, if you go to 3rd or 4th century Judaism, then, saying, talking about the Trinity would have been seriously frowned upon, would have been a big problem. But if you were in the 1st century and you said, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, and so on, would not have been a terribly problematic view. Let's see. IP, in your debate with Hassan, you said the Gospel of John was written by John of the 12. Did you misspeak, or do you disagree with Richard Bauckham?
I tend to go back and forth on that. I tend to not really care, though. I think it was a eyewitness named John, and it could either have been John Mark or John the son of Zebedee, who could have either one could have, or John, one of them could have become John the Elder, like John Mark. That's what Luke Vandewey has argued. So I kind of go back and forth on it. Not really nailed down on that. It's clearly John, an eyewitness who was a disciple.
Malik is the champion for pro-Islamic dilemma, yet he is the greatest Muslim defender of the Islamic dilemma. Allah only made it appear that the Quran was revealed, but it got al-zudded by Malik, who also al-zudded Jake and his devils advocating the Injil. It was pretty powerful. IP, did you tell David about the Dawah files?
Oh, so yeah, we had a guy call in on our call-in stream.
People were commenting on that. People were commenting on that in the super chat of my last live stream, and I said, "Well, he's going to be here."
Yeah, so there was a guy. He's a white convert to Islam. He just left Islam recently because of racism. The community was shunning him, but he had helped develop Dawah arguments, and so he was really deep in it. And so he told us the story. Yeah, he told us the story. He told us how he was treated. It was absolutely horrible. They basically got really racist. They shunned him. They treated him disrespectfully. He was a white convert to Islam. He says
that's weird. They normally are like the biggest fanboys in the world of white converts. No, mainly white girls, to be fair, but they do like some white converts normally. So I don't know where he's from.
He explained it quite well. He said yeah, they want white converts because they look at Westerners as superior, and so they want them to join. But then they join, and they still regret feeling inferior to white Westerners. So they treat them horribly, even though they want them in their religion. And so it kind of made sense the way he explained it. And so he says he's got a whole Dawah script he was using to help train Muslims to do Dawah. He's going to send it to us, and we're going to help him start to do some anti-Islam apologetic stuff, because he's got a lot of knowledge, it seems. And he said he's ready for a crusade against Islam. He says Islam ruined his life, even though he gave it all.
Islam definitely ruins things, lots and lots of things. The Google Scholar said, that was me talking to Malik at DebateCon. I asked Jake about that sin expiation dilemma, and he really didn't have any answer. Hashtag David wears dad shoes. Yeah. You know, it's funny, they're making fun of my dad shoes because I just get the most basic pair of Nikes, and they're all making fun of me for that. What's funny is I actually have a couple pairs of Run DMC Adidas from back in the day. I should have rocked those, and no one would have made fun of me. They would have all thought I was the coolest person in the universe. Yeah. So I now know for the future. I'm just kidding. I'm going to keep wearing my dad's shoes. Hey, Google Scholar. Dude, you're super sharp, and you should be making actual videos. So contact me if you need any help at that. You would, just talking to you, I can tell you would do well on YouTube. So let me know if you're interested. Off topic, but check out Crowder's interview with Ken Paxton. They talk Epic City. Epic City, happiest place in the world. Only Allah contradicts himself in the same passage. Oh, yeah, that came up in the last. Allah contradicts himself. Muslim gave a book to me praising Mo with no source. Yeah, that sounds about right. Be careful. The Dawah guys are using AI, advanced Islamic technology, using algorithms from the golden age of Islam. That's why they're coming up with all this powerful stuff. Ooh, don't make Mr. Wood angry by saying nonsense. Yeah, D. Wood doesn't like nonsense. I especially don't like nonsense if you post it and then we respond to it and then you keep posting it. That's just annoying. IP looked up Ahmed. I did not see the word glorious anywhere on any list. Just a simple Google search exposed this.
Yeah, that's what Libiano tried to say in my debate. That
Yeah, I heard about that.
Ahmed means the most glorious one. And I was like, I don't think that's right. He's like, no, it is. I'm like, if you say so, but it doesn't matter because you're not even making an argument. So like it was, I don't know if I've ever debated someone who was just so confident and at the same time just didn't know what he was talking about. It was so dumb. He couldn't even make a coherent argument.
That sounds like Dawah, guys. Momo is the parrot repeating false stories. Parrot sheet repeating false stories. Oh, was that mean parakeet? Saying this is Mahmud is saying Mahmud is a guider other than Allah, even after his death, which is polytheism in Islam. The passages is literally talking about remembering the guidance of God by the Spirit.
All right.
David TikTok, time to rock al zut. YouTube, time to loop. Oh, very rude. I found Muhammad in the Bible, 1 John 1:22. He is Antichrist that denieth the Father and the Son. Yeah, every passage that would actually apply to Muhammad is warning you not to follow him. They asked to read the Quran in context. Impossible. Yeah. Unitarians always say that the multiple Yahweh in the Old Testament is just to show his omnipresence. How do I explain that the specific language used doesn't make sense if it's just to show omnipresence?
Because it's referring to different persons. It's not just Yahweh being in different places. It's Yahweh talking about his messenger who he's calling Yahweh. So that's not how that works.
Two more here. Makes total sense to an Arab who got his message from the angel Gabriel in a cave to reinterpret the Hebrew scriptures. No witnesses, scriptures. Worse, the book of Enoch is far more credible. Oh, anything's more credible than Muhammad, pretty much. I don't know how to reach you. Hey, Google Scholar, go to my YouTube homepage. You're on the channel right now, and there would be a spot to click on my email, and my email will pop up. So check that out and send me a message. All right, ready to check out this video?
Oh, yeah, let's do it. This is a video responding to us worried that we're going to trash their book.
Oh, we're gonna trash their book. That's a fact. Let's see. And the video is titled "The Impact of Abraham Fulfilled" or something like that. Let's check it out.
Yeah. God.
They did have some or something like that in here somewhere. I remember cutting stuff out that wasn't actual.
Yeah.
Like saying stuff.
Not too long ago, Christian apologists were laughing at Muslims who claim Muhammad is in the Bible.
That's true. We still are. Well, unless you're clear and you say, you know, there are all these passages about false prophets that definitely apply to Muhammad.
We've heard this for years, and in Christian circles and in Jewish circles, this is a point of laughter for us.
And it still is.
Yeah, it still is.
Now they mobilize going
We're
so
basically
far
going
as
to demolish all the Muhammad. The Bible stuff as like the main thing next year. Our main focus of 2026 is going to be Muhammad and the Bible, and inspiring philosophy is going to be the point man on that. He's going through everything on this, but different people are going to focus on different particular passages and so on. Why have they radically changed their tune? It's not radically changing our tune. We still think it's a laughably stupid argument. We just realize you guys are so obsessed with, you guys have tons of people going around lying, and we just realized based on the Islamic dilemma and how that worked out in 2025, that when we kind of all respond to it, then everyone catches on, right? Like I've been running the Islamic dilemma for probably almost 2 decades. I've been using that argument, and there are other people. There were some other people who are using that argument. It didn't really catch on and take off until everyone started rolling with it. So we realized, hey, that's the most effective way to respond to the Dawah nonsense. We're all doing our own thing, but at the same time, we focus on one big Islamic argument, run with it the entire year until everyone starts catching on. And so it was kind of, okay, they admit the scientific argument, the scientific miracles argument's been destroyed. They admit the perfect preservation argument has been destroyed. What do you got left? Like Muhammad and the Bible, right? Muhammad and the Bible. So you guys are going to have to kind of be all in on Muhammad and the Bible. And guess what? It's connected to the Islamic dilemma, which we ran last year. It's connected to it, right? That the Quran offers two main arguments for Jews and Christians. Believe in Muhammad and the Quran because Muhammad and the Quran affirm your scriptures. And so you should believe in the Quran in return. That's a stupid argument, but it's extra stupid and circular if you're simultaneously saying the Torah and the gospel have been corrupted. But then the other main argument is Muhammad's mentioned in your scriptures. And so we just realized, wait a minute, if we run the Islamic dilemma and we take out Muhammad in the Bible, an argument of the Quran, then it's like there is absolutely no reason, according to the Quran, for any Jew or Christian to ever take Muhammad seriously, right?
And by the way, Than and I are working on videos where we're going to do like things like the biblical prophet dilemma, which is if Muhammad is not in the Bible, Islam is false. But if Muhammad is in the Bible, Islam is false. So even if they try to find Muhammad in the Bible, Islam is still false because whatever prophet the Bible predicts has to be in line with the theology of the Bible. Muhammad isn't. So you can't find that Muhammad in the Bible. If it predicts a future prophet, it can't be Muhammad because he contradicts everything the Bible teaches.
And that's a problem. But yep, guys, so we want to zoot this argument all year long, combine it with versions of the Islamic dilemma, and it's just going to be a nightmare, which is why they're panicking right now and already cranking out videos when we're just getting started and when we're about to get started. And it's going to be, they're changing their tune because they've realized this is such a powerful argument. No, we've realized how, you guys are so quick to lie that we've realized unless we actually just work together to go through all this stuff. If you put out an entire book and the entire book is nothing but lies, it's like someone's going to look at that. I don't have time to go through every single lie in there. As a community, we can go through and expose every single lie in there. Hence, working together, which is what we're going to do this year. And guys, catch us this time next year and see who takes Muhammad and the Bible seriously. He said we've changed our tunes because of Abraham fulfilled. I read like 2 or 3 pages of the dumbest, most idiotic nonsense I've ever heard in my life.
The brothers have rigorously developed a way in which they can objectively examine these passages of the Bible.
This is quite groundbreaking in a sense that it is so detailed and so expansive.
So we got a bunch of Muslims
and
saying
by the way,
how brilliant this book is when we can't go like a paragraph without being lied to in that book.
And by the way, what Ijaz says there is wrong. They didn't actually develop any methodology in the book. Like, you guys remember Mike Lacona's book? The first 200 pages of this, he's not even talking about the resurrection. He's talking about his methodology that he's establishing. There's nothing like that in Abraham fulfilled. They have no methodology they follow, and they contradict themselves. They have double standards. Like, they'll attack Christians for metaphorical interpretations of Isaiah 53, but then they'll do it for like Deuteronomy 33 and not realize what they're doing. So they have incredible double standards. There's no rigorous methodology that was employed in this book.
No, their actual methodology is anything we can twist into supporting Islam, we'll do it. And anything that doesn't help with that, we lie about it and say it's corrupted and this and that. And that's the real method.
Definitely has set a high bar for future works by anybody in
Yeah, they set a high bar. Like, how's anyone going to lie more than this, right? Show me someone. They could put this out as a challenge. Show me any book filled with more lies than this, apart from the Quran, or you have to admit that it is the greatest book ever written.
And particularly in the Dawah field.
Book.
Oh, they got the
Abraham
Muslim Cowboy.
Fulfilled. If you haven't read it, Adnan Rashid, Abu Zakaria, and Zakir Hussain did an amazing, fabulous job.
I have IP. I have to say, one easy way to make videos about all of this is just take any little paragraph, just a paragraph, look at what they say, and actually go to the sources and point out what's actually being said. And it may take a while, but after like 200 of those videos showing what liars these guys are, maybe people will start to catch on.
Well, that's why I made the PDF, sent it to you, sent it to like Avery, everybody else. So like you, Thaddeus, everyone can start making videos on this. You got all my notes now. I mean,
yeah, we should have some meeting here. I'd like to go through all like the classic versions just for people who followed like Zakir Naik and Shabir Ali and stuff like that on, this is sort of, Song of Solomon 5:16 is clearly about Muhammad. Look, it says Mahmadim. That must be Muhammad.
That's in here.
No. I know it, but I guarantee they're not doing that. Oh, it's Mahmadim, therefore it must be Muhammad. It's going to be, well, if you look at these scholars and these Christians have interpreted it metaphorically. So if Christians can do that, why can't Muslims? And if you look at this and you combine it with that and what this church father said and what that person said and what this scholar said and so on, you see, it must be Muhammad. So in other words, they make it more difficult by compounding the lies. They make it by sort of outsourcing it to, outside the Bible, which is weird because, again, it's supposed to be we go to the Bible and find Muhammad, not you go to this German scholar and who's definitely not saying it's Muhammad, but taking a quote from him and combining it with a quote from this guy and combining it with a quote from this church father and so on, and then putting it all together. But that's what I mean. Those classic hey, it says Mahmadim. You shouldn't translate a name. It's a name. It's a name Muhammad. And therefore, this is a name. This is the name Muhammad. I kind of want to respond to like the traditional versions, and then we can kind of, everyone else, including me after I make all those, but we'll go into like detail and actually go through all their claims and go through their stupid, idiotic quote mining.
Yeah, they try to say that it is Mahmadim is Muhammad. It's the same crap. I mean, it's so bad.
No, I know they're going to say that. I'm saying the way they argue, the traditional argument was Mahmad. Look, it sounds like Muhammad. It has to be Muhammad. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not realizing Mahmad is used over and over again in the Old Testament and doesn't make any sense. But yeah, we should kind of figure out. All right, who wants to make videos on going through their stupid stuff on John 14? Who wants to respond to their stupid stuff on Deuteronomy 18 and like that? And then because it's going to be some work. It's going to be some work. It's like a race. It's like their attitude is we can tell lies faster than you can respond to the lies.
Oh, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
That's the method.
Credit where it is due. There's a book entitled Abraham Fulfilled. It is one of the best presentations from Muslims on this subject. If I answer well, it's probably because of the influence from reading that book. The ideas are still in my mind.
One tip I'll give you, when you're dealing with a Mohammedan, you need to ask them where they're getting their interpretation from, where they're getting this all from. Because they're getting it all from this book, right?
And in the outdated Dawah script of Adnan Rashid that is now being used by all the Dawah girls and boys,
Muslims have massively upped their game. Okay, notice what upping their game is. They're upping their game is going from cherry picking and ripping verses out of context and completely destroying verses in the Bible to making it more difficult because now they're quoting commentaries and stuff like that, which now you have to look up those commentaries in order to spot the lies. So their view of upping their game is making it more difficult to track down the lies. Yeah, that is why we're responding to it. You guys are telling more lies in order to kind of defend your original lies. So why wouldn't we want to respond to all these lies? The fruits are apparent. Thanks to the popularization of new prophecies.
We'll go through
I'm
this.
not gonna lie, man. I mean, this is pretty, Well,
Hey, little side note. Daniel 2:7.
Yep.
The Quran says that we find Muhammad mentioned in the Torah and the Gospel.
Daniel 2 is their new favorite one.
No, I know, but the Quran says we find Muhammad mentioned in the Torah and the Gospel. Why are you guys going to Song of Solomon, Daniel 2? Isn't that interesting? It's like they don't even have a quote that says Muhammad's mentioned in Daniel. but they're going to it.
Say irrefutable. It's probably been answered by someone, but this is some tough stuff. I mean, it's not fun. It's not funny, right?
Can you address the prophecy?
Yeah. Do you have a response?
And little side note, guys, even the reason for going to Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 is for years they played this whack-a-mole game, right? It started off and it's just, it's Deuteronomy 18:18 and John 14. Then once we start blasting those, then it's, and this passage in Isaiah and this passage here and this passage there. And it's every time you refute one of them, they move on to another one. They move on to another one. And they try to get to, they always want to go to one that you're not familiar with. So in other words, people started becoming familiar with Deuteronomy 18. So they'd have to come up with other ones and so on. And after we go through all this stuff and expose the fact that none of these sources are saying anything that helps them, they're going to find more. They're going to, let's go quote mine more and find more obscure sources. And it's just, what is the argument? That we open up the Torah and the gospel, we find Muhammad mentioned. Show us that. Weird.
And by the way, like the guy's talking right now is Libiano, the Orthodox Muslim. He has been pushing this idea that Daniel 2 predicts Islam for like a year. He gets in a debate with me. Like, it's all he has wanted to talk about. But when he gets into my debate, he's like, I want to move on to other topics. Because I started to pull out some historical facts on him that he had no clue about, and he buckled under the pressure and started running on Daniel because he couldn't actually defend his claims, which we'll get into Daniel more in this live stream. But you'll see for like the whole year, just using Daniel. Daniel shows Islam is true. Gets in a debate with me, doesn't want to talk about Daniel anymore. Really interesting. So you learn the arguments that I'll give you today, and you start using them on Muslims when you debate them on TikTok, they will stop using this argument because they don't want to have to go through the complicated history to just find out they're wrong. They'll just move on and try some other lie.
That sounds like them.
Well, no, I was asking about the prophecy. You just explained it to me.
Okay.
Okay, so do you have a refutation?
No, I'm not going to refute that.
By the way, notice what they do. It's their goal is obviously catch someone off guard, right? Who's not familiar with it. Say, hey, this has to be Muhammad. How do you refute that? I don't know. I didn't know what you're going to. I don't know. I haven't even studied this. That's what someone's going to say. That's who they're looking for. And then if I peek, and then I don't want to talk about that.
That's why. Yes, that's what happened. I did Libiano. He couldn't catch me off guard with Daniel, so he didn't want to talk about it. And he's like, I don't want to talk about this anymore. So what do you expect?
You can't. That's why. I'm telling you, wallahi, no one can. No one. I'm sorry.
Sure. Yeah. No, it isn't.
So Matthew 21 is the kingdom of God, which is an Islamic kingdom. That's your claim.
Yes.
Which is also referenced in Daniel 2.
Correct.
And Daniel 7, right?
Correct.
Okay. So in all of these references,
can we just go to Daniel, please?
No, we're right here.
We have to go to Daniel.
This is stuck here. Because
why won't you go to Daniel?
Because we're stuck in what you quoted.
Did you hear what they called him out for? He's like, hey, you quoted Matthew, and you're saying this fulfills. Hey, let's look at it. No, go to Daniel. Whoa, you're talking about Matthew. Let's focus on Matthew. No, go to Daniel. And then, you see, chicken, you don't want. So what? He wants to actually address a point that you bring up instead of this constantly jumping. And by the way, what you just said, as soon as he realized he couldn't get you on Daniel, then he wants to move on to something else. That's standard. Yeah. And by the way, guys, that's how you ordinarily spot someone who's sincere versus someone who's not sincere. Someone who's sincere will generally be willing to stick, and go through an argument very carefully, focusing and being careful because they think that a careful examination is going to prove them right. What you'll see from Dawah guys is they'll bring something up, and as soon as they see that you know what you're talking about, they want to switch the topic. And they want to keep doing that. And then if they see what you're talking about over there, they'll switch it again. And then they'll keep doing that until you're like, I'm not sure about, and that's what they'll want to focus on. Like clockwork.
Yeah. Pretty much, yeah.
Let's go to Daniel logic. Why won't you go?
No, you're running from this.
No, I'm exactly on topic. I'm saying that Daniel is Islam. Let's talk about it.
Listen to the problem that you have. You said, I'm not granting. I disagree that the kingdom is Islamic kingdom. That's what I disagree with.
Okay, so can I go to that?
No, you're very slick. You tried it.
I don't get. I mean, Avery is just saying, hey, let's address a point before you move on to something else. You brought up that, let's go to, and they're, chicken. You're not changing the subject every time the Muslim wants to change the subject.
Right.
Okay, let's deal with me.
You're not dealing with me.
Let's go to,
You're not dealing with me.
Can we go to the book of Daniel?
Did I let you speak?
Is this not scripture?
Did I let you speak?
You did, man. Go ahead.
Okay.
Logic. Why only the New Testament? Why can't we go to the Old
I'll say it
Testament?
again. I'll say it again.
Okay.
Because you quoted
Okay.
Matthew. Hold on, please. You quoted Matthew 21.
I'm gonna use Daniel because Daniel is a prophet.
I don't even, how are they putting this up as something that supports them and Avery being a chicken? He's saying, we're addressing what you brought up before you move on to something else.
Right. They don't want to do that because, as typical, they just want to catch people off guard. That's all this is. And then move on. Let's not talk about the passage, because when you start talking about the passage, their entire case falls apart.
And so actually sticking to a point until you address it and refute it, that makes you a chicken. And if we keep playing chicken sounds, then guess what? Welcome to Dawah 2026, guys. Chicken sounds for someone who wants to stick to a point that someone brought up.
From God, than Old Testament.
Okay.
But is it not binding upon you?
Hold on a second.
Is it not binding? Okay,
But if
good.
you quote the New Testament.
But unfortunately, this conversation isn't only bound by the New Testament logic. You must deal with me and actually go to Daniel.
Okay.
You have to.
Okay, I think that you have to deal with me and get to the New Testament.
Logic.
Appreciate it, man.
Wow.
Yep, I've been reading Abraham Fulfilled, a horrible written book.
Awful. Oh, it's super bad.
Got to pay attention to our actions.
Listen, this is why
the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life.
This guy is such a propaganda artist. If we don't address the book, we're running from it. If we do, well, we're scared of it. So we have to do this. This is propaganda at its finest.
Yep.
No matter what we do, we're terrified of the book.
Yeah, and just think about the reasoning here. If your argument is so ridiculously absurd and based on massive deception that it's like an insane joke to us, that means we wouldn't actually focus on refuting it. We wouldn't do that. We wouldn't focus on refuting it unless we take it really seriously as it must be true. Okay, why do you guys focus on the Trinity all day and all night? I mean, it's just laughably absurd to you, right? And you guys focus on it all day and all night, which means deep down you must really know it's true, right? According to your reasoning. Why would you guys have your overall Dawah campaign as attacking the Trinity? Unless you know it's true and it's so powerful.
It must be.
There's nothing more they would love than for Muslims to abandon Muhammad and the Bible. They're going to.
No. Please keep doing it, because it's actually going to show that you're going to refute Islam. Because if you find a future of Gentile prophet in the Bible, it means Islam is false. Because that prophet has to be in line with the theology of the Bible. That can't be Islam, therefore Islam is false.
With that said, as far as completely destroying the argument, it's your last remaining argument for why Jews and Christians should believe in Muhammad and the Quran. So when this one falls, and it will fall, you got nothing. You got nothing else. There's nothing else that Allah says that is relevant to us. As Umar wisely said, look to where the enemy's arrows are pointed. You guys always point at the Trinity, right? Point your arrows at the Trinity. So you must believe that it's our main focus of 2026 is going to be Muhammad and the Bible. It's good that they watch all our live streams. That is good. Bible, Muhammad and the Bible. Because if we just say this stuff in random live streams when we're talking about stuff. As far as Deuteronomy, I mean, it says from among your brothers. That's only used in Deuteronomy of your fellow Jews. It's not from anyone else. And so the idea that this would be referring to an Arab is just insane. In the previous chapter, where it's talking about the king that you're going to choose, you have to choose one from among your brothers. And it specifically said from among your brothers, not a foreigner. If you go just 2 verses later, Deuteronomy 18:20, it gives 2 criteria of a false prophet. It says if a prophet speaks in the name of other gods or delivers a revelation that doesn't come from God, he's a false prophet, he shall die. And that would mean that he would be executed. Now they're using the Islamic method of saying, look, we put a bunch of words, so we must have refuted it.
Yep.
Yeah. You've read that chapter that they're putting on the screen. I haven't. Do you think they've refuted objections to Muhammad being the prophet like Moses?
To be clear, I've read this book twice now. I've read it through twice now, and no,
You see, why would he have read it twice unless he knows that it's the truth? So do you think they showed?
No, we'll get into this in a little bit when we go through that chapter, but you'll see like they don't even address half the arguments that need to be addressed. And again, they use outdated scholarship. They quote some guy like, I think his name is like Bleckensop, and they'd ignore scholars that have actually responded to him and refuted him because it's that bad. So again, always outdated scholarship, not even addressing half our arguments. It's so bad.
But they obviously put a bunch of words, so that must be the refutation. What's crazy is your average Dawah fan is just like, he's not reading any of this. He's just going, oh, so many words. They must have refuted David Wood. They must have refuted him. Muhammad did both of those with.
I'm convinced if Muslims defending the book, they either haven't read the book or they're just lying. I mean, they're incredibly stupid.
Well, yeah, there's that too. But yeah, they believe that lying is fine as long as it's for Islam, and they rely upon stupidity. And fortunately, Daniel even admitted it. He likes low IQs because that helps you not leave Islam. Satanic verses. Yeah, end of Deuteronomy, it says what it means in the context of Deuteronomy to be a prophet like Moses. It's someone who does signs and wonders and someone who knows God face to face. So that's not Muhammad. Well, thank you for playing my response and promising that you've refuted it. They're going to have to do better. Otherwise, their campaign will be dead on arrival. Oh, yeah, that's the idea of going into detail and actually going through. So why are you guys upset that we're going to go through your stupid arguments?
Well, when you're ready, you put my screen up and we can start looking at some of the things they say. I'm going to show some just methodological errors that I cannot believe they did not catch in their review of this stuff. So we can start there. Then we can go to the chapter on Daniel and the chapter on Deuteronomy 18.
All right, let me take these a couple of super chats here real quick. I found Muhammad and John, as in bathroom. That's good. Eli says, love you both. Yeah, I'll be seeing you tomorrow, Eli. I'm constantly questioning if it's in the Al-Zut sense. Thank you, T. Wood. Yeah, you always got to ask, is this in the Al-Zut sense or not? The men of Al-Zut were from India. A common name in India is Raman Deep. Phonic fallacy or epic foreshadowing? Yes, you see, this is the prophecy of what would happen to Muhammad. Doing a small group Islamic dilemma presentation at my church soon. Pray for me. Also, what are the top Dawah responses to the dilemma? It kind of depends on like what you think, what like the best or just like the most common. The most common Dawah responses are like Surah 2, verse 79. So, yeah, learn that one. I can't think of any good Dawah response. I've pointed out before what I think would be the best response, but no one uses it except for like, maybe some Sufis or something like that take that approach. But all the responses suck.
Like conscious edits, you got to show how the entire argument from conscious edits is circular, because they think the Quran is consciously editing the Bible, but the Quran makes the claim that it's confirming our scriptures so that we should believe in their scriptures. So think about that. The Quran is consciously editing the Bible. So you pick out the parts of the Bible that are been selected by the Quran, then you are supposed to use those parts to believe in the Quran. And once you believe in the Quran, you can consciously edit the Bible, then you use those parts to believe in the Quran. It's just a circular nonsense.
Who has more evidence for being in the Bible, Muhammad or Mike Winger? Well, we know that false prophets are prophesied in the Bible, as well as horribly evil people coming. So they both fit. New dilemma, shirk dilemma, Quran 480, 459, 332, 59.7, especially when Muslims, where the Bible says Jesus is God, Quran explicitly associates Muhammad with Allah. Yeah, that is an ongoing issue. In fact, I've met Quran-only Muslims who won't recite the Shahada, as in there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. They'll only quote there is no God but Allah. And they say if you attach Muhammad to that, that's shirk. So yeah, they're pretty serious about it. Not associating Muhammad. Remember Ducklip's camera conveniently cutting out.
Yeah, he does that a lot, and people think he's using it as a ploy to like check something or look something up or check a text from somebody, and did it during our debate. And so there's been a lot of theories that he does that conveniently at times when he knows he needs help from somebody.
Orthoduclips. That's funny. Let's see. I want the book without paying for it. Well, if you don't want to,
it's free.
You get a free
the
PDF.
Sapien website. Yeah. Yeah. There's a free PDF. Yeah. And I can send you a free PDF if you want. Just email me through inspiringphilosophy.com and we'll get you a copy. Very easy.
Yep. So just pretty easy. Go to their site. You got it. PDF. D Wood IP. Why not use John 6:53 to prove Jesus' divinity?
Truly, truly, I say to you that unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life. Yeah. I mean, that's another part. I mean, we need God for eternal life. Jesus gives that through the Eucharist. So that makes sense. Yeah. It's another one to use. Yeah.
D Wood, did you not know that Allah has 100 attributes? The 100th is now known as D. Diddy Woods, apparently. Muhammad is in the Bible. It talks of false prophets, but I'm an atheist, so what do I know? Yeah. Well, you can be an atheist and say, hey, according to the Bible, Muhammad's an obvious false prophet. Yeah, sure. And Islam is also mentioned in Apocalypse 6 in intent, weaponry, consequence, and color in that order. I'm wondering if IP found John 41 yet. Someone tell you about John 41? Hey, there's no sound, man. You muted yourself.
Sorry, Libiano was asking me, did Jesus fulfill this in John 41? I'm like, John 41? And then he said it a couple more times, and I'm like, there is no John 41. He meant Psalms.
You see?
So, yeah.
Inspiring philosophy is running from the powerful argument of John 41. Don't let grandpa Momo babysit your 6-year-old girl. Yeah, that would be bad. And do both of you consider Roman Catholics and Eastern Orthodox brothers? Question for both. Yes, I would.
I do. And
it's going to depend on. It's going to depend on the particular person. Like you could be an evil, like unregenerate scumbag, claiming to be, Roman Catholic or something like that. So it's going to depend on the person, but. Yeah. If you believe that Jesus is the divine Son of God who died on the cross for sins and rose from the dead and other things that we're told to believe, then I can still think you're wrong on all kinds of things and so on. But I would have a difficult problem. I would have a difficult time saying you're not my brother. All right. Even though some of them would say that about me, but I won't hold that against them. All right. You ready to jump into this?
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to have to mess around with this. I'm going to have to mess around with this for a second to figure out this picture versus picture thing. One second.
That's fine. Well, you do that. I'll just talk about so this is the book. All my notes here on the side. As you can see, I made 854 comments on this book.
Yeah, that's not going to work. Hang on.
Yep. Hold on.
Hang on. No, that's not working. How did I do this? Hang on.
Amateur hour, it seems.
No, it is. I'm not used to doing this, man. Wait, it says show picture in picture. What if I do this? Oh, hey, ha-ha, in your face, man. Ha-ha, you thought I couldn't do it. And here I did it. In your face. All right, how big do you want us on here?
Small as you can, so we can put us down in the corner. Yep, there we go.
Hang on. If we're over here.
Perfect.
Hang on, I can actually make this a little bigger. Look at this awesome technology, guys. D. Wood is moving up in the world and actually figuring out how to use the programs he's been using for probably 10 years.
Okay. So this is the preface. Let's notice what they say. They say Muslim research into the topic has sadly stagnated for the most part of the last few decades, while Jewish and Christian apologists have become increasingly sophisticated in their responses and objections. Many Muslim apologists have not really advanced their arguments, sticking to the same century-old material and approaches. The stagnation is so great that many Jewish and Christian apologists now treat the topic as a joke, even in high-level academic debates. Well,
that's why they flipped out when we said it's a joke.
Yeah. So the funny thing is they admit this. It's kind of weird. And I just point out the book doesn't really change this. But I mean, it's just funny that they admit that their arguments have been a joke. But now this book is going to fix that because they just kind of recycle a lot of the old arguments that were being used, like Deuteronomy 18, Song of Solomon 5:16, the Paraclete and John. It's like So they're using those same arguments. So they're basically just admitting they're just reusing trash arguments and they didn't even realize it. But here's something that's very, very important about this book that needs to be pointed out. If you go to the end, so I'm going to go to page 408 here. They say something that's really kind of startling. And see if you catch this, David. So throughout the book, over and over again, they're like saying this one particular passage is reliable. But then this other part of, like, let's say Genesis is unreliable. They'll be like, Deuteronomy 18:18 is reliable. But then they'll say in the book, Deuteronomy 17:15 is an unreliable later addition. It's the corrupted parts. So they're constantly picking and choosing which parts are corrupted and which parts are not. What is their methodology for knowing which parts are corrupted and which are not? They say it right here. They say, all the evidence is unanimous and points to the Bible having a dual nature. That is, it is a mixture of corruption and revelation. Any Islamic sources that mention the corruption of the scriptures of Jews and Christians is a reference to those portions of the Bible that are not divine in origin, but rather man-made. Any mention of revelatory knowledge in their scriptures, such as the prophecies about the coming of Muhammad, is a reference to those portions of the Bible that originate in divine revelation given to prophets such as Moses and Jesus. Notice what they just said. They just said, okay, well, what's the criteria for determining which parts of the Bible are corrupt or which not? If it agrees with Islam.
Yep.
5 years of research, 3 authors. They didn't realize they just admitted at the end their entire argument has been circular.
Dude,
if it agrees with Islam,
yeah, you should just point out Muslims admit their argument from Muhammad in the Bible is circular, and you could quote them in videos and stuff saying this, but you can quote this passage right here. But so, guys, everyone, think about why this is such a problem. This is supposedly an argument for Jews and Christians. Jews and Christians, you should believe in Muhammad because he's mentioned in the Torah and the Gospel. He's prophesied as a prophet in the Torah and the Gospel. We go to the Torah and the Gospel. This doesn't line up with Islam at all. This contradicts Islam left and right. Yeah, but you don't realize that the real method is whatever agrees with Islam, that's the good part. That's reliable. Whatever doesn't agree with Islam, that part has been corrupted. So you see, okay, what is that? You're telling us we have to assume from the beginning, in your argument for why we should believe in Muhammad as a prophet, we have to start by assuming that Muhammad is a prophet and that Islam is true. Then we take that as the standard. We go to our own books. We throw out all the parts that don't agree with that. We take what's left and go with your twisted explanations, claiming that this is about Muhammad. And then we conclude, oh my goodness, Muhammad's a prophet and Islam is true. Wait, your entire argument required us to assume that from the beginning. It required it.
And notice this other sentence here. They have the audacity to say this. They say, if we go where the evidence leads us, then all of these factors can easily be explained without having to resort to mental gymnastics. It's like
all you guys have is mental gymnastics.
That's what this whole thing is. Like, they just admitted it's circular. It's a mental gymnastic. This whole book is an exercise in circular reasoning, mental gymnastics. I cannot believe it, but
yeah. So hang on. What we can say is, the argument as it's put in the Quran, Muhammad is mentioned in the Torah and the Gospel. Well, guess what? That's a pretty straightforward argument. We're supposed to go to the Torah and the Gospel, and we'll find Muhammad mentioned if this argument is good. We go to the Bible, doesn't line up with Muhammad at all, so we reject the argument. But notice that argument, the original argument is not circular. It's just a bad argument. It contains a false premise. This is circular. They turned it into a circular argument, which is and nothing but mental gymnastics. And then they say they can explain it without having to resort to mental gymnastics. This is insane, man.
Yeah, I mean, they've debunked their whole book here with this quote. They get to the end, they put this quote. They've debunked their whole book by admitting this, and they didn't even realize it. 5 years of research, 3 authors. They didn't realize they debunked the whole book. They admitted it's all circular. They have no sound methodology. Again, Mike Licona, 200 pages of going over his methodology. These guys, this is their methodology. Pretty dumb. But
so hang on. So following up on what I just pointed out, What we can say is, like, the Quran doesn't even say where we find Muhammad, what we, the Quran doesn't even say. Just, oh, you find him mentioned in your scriptures. Okay, well, we're looking around, Muslims have been looking for years and stuff like that. We don't find it. We don't find it. So it's just false. We find Muhammad mentioned. No, we don't. We most certainly don't. The Bible contradicts Muhammad. But this is supposedly the best case they've got. So, IP, can we say that the best, after 14 centuries of trying to defend the Quran's argument, the best case they've been able to come up with is hopelessly circular, relies on nothing but cherry picking and so on, and therefore the best they could do is a big pile of logical fallacies.
Yeah, that's essentially what happens.
All right, that's good to know.
Yeah. But I mean, like, there's also double standards. So let me go back to the beginning, and I'm just going to do a quick search here. So I'm going to search for rabbi, okay?
Based.
So you'll see 182 matches. So let's go enter. So I'll go through a couple of these. Just see, look, so they'll quote like Rabbi Ibn Ezra, okay? Rabbi Maimonides, rabbinic sources, Rabbi Maimonides, rabbis, rabbinic commentaries, rabbis. Look, I'm not even on, like, I'm only on what, like page 50 here. And you can see they're constantly quoting rabbis over and over again. Okay, here's what happens. Let's say we go to page, 332. What are they doing here? They're attacking rabbis and how they interpret. What do they say? Rabbis claim that they employ remez, which devolves into the deeper meaning of scripture, then do not contradict the pashat, which is the plain meaning. So what are they doing here? They're basically, they spend this next part attacking rabbis. They say, yet a historical study of their judicial verdicts, as well as their discussions on theology and ethics, reveals the exact opposite is the case. There is, in fact, many instances of deliberate misinterpretation, which are contrary to the plain meaning of biblical text. Then they go list some examples, which I agree with. But you just spent the whole book relying on rabbinic interpretations. And now you get to this section of the book and you're like, you can't trust the rabbis, guys. You can't trust, because they just deliberately misinterpret passages. Are you kidding me? How do you say this after you've been relying on rabbis throughout the entire book to help you interpret the Bible? You can't make this stuff up, how bad this is.
Yeah, this is pretty terrible. So we saw this. We saw that this was their method with the Bible when, again, they would go to a Bible verse that could be twisted. It doesn't matter. The first 20 verses can all contradict Islam. They'll ignore that. Then they'll find, the next verse, oh, here's something we can twist. And then all the verses after that could completely contradict Islam. They'll go to the one that they can twist and say, you see, this is the proof. This proves that Islam is true, which will work on people who have never read the passage and stuff, because you just walk up to them, look at this quote. Look at this quote. Oh, my goodness. Look, this obviously means this. And they're stupid people who would fall for that, or people who are gullible and don't bother to check things out. But notice what they do. It's this verse of the Bible can be used for something for us. Therefore, and everything else in the chapter doesn't work. So everything else in the chapter is wrong. This verse is right, and we'll go. Okay, so that we knew that was their method. Then what do we see when we go with the Islamic dilemma? Same thing with the Quran. It's let's go to verses of the Quran that we can twist into agreeing with us and throw out all the verses that refute us. Those are unreliable. And what do they do with rabbis and the Talmud? Oh, anything that they say that we can twist into something for Islam, that's good. That's a good, you got to trust these rabbis. And then when they say things that refute Islam, oh, you can't trust these rabbis, do not trust these guys. They do the same thing with their scholars. You can go to a Quran verse and look up, you can go to Qurtubi, and he'll give 14 different interpretations from Muslim scholars on the exact same verse. And sometimes they're like wildly contradictory. What will they do? They'll look at those 14 interpretations. They'll go with the one they want. You see, this is the proof, and they'll ignore everything else. They'll do that with Bible commentaries. They'll do it with church fathers. They'll do it with everything. Somehow they have these massive filters over their heads, and they can only see something that can be twisted into a confirmation of what they're trying to claim. Everything else that completely refutes them, nope. So all the Bible verses that refute Islam, they're garbage. All the Quran verses that support the Islamic dilemma, nope, Allah didn't mean any of that. He meant the opposite. Allah just is really bad at communication. We'll go through the Talmud. Anything that we can twist into something, yep, that's good. Anything else, no, can't trust the rabbis. And it's just like, this is, just to be clear, you could defend anything using this methodology. You could pick any ideology in history, no matter how insane it is, using this methodology, you could defend it. This is how you would but guess what? This is how you defend a lie. The truth does not need this. The truth does not need massive cherry picking, circular reasoning. The truth doesn't need that. Lies need that. Lies need that. And so if your best case for Muhammad and the Bible is nothing but lies and logical fallacies, that kind of says something about the idea that Muhammad is in the Bible. If your best case is just massively fallacious, idiotic nonsense.
Let me go back a little bit here. Let's talk about what they say about Christians. So they talk about how the way Christians interpret the Bible, and they're very upset. So they use Isaiah 53 as a case study, and they highlight the verse, "He will see his offspring he will see his offspring and prolong his days." And they go, well, Christians interpret this metaphorically because Jesus didn't have any biological children. So what do they say? They say, why interpret the mention of those things that support the crucifixion, such as the suffering literally, whereas those things that go against Jesus, such as having children and a prolonged life, interpreted metaphorically? So they say, so to be consistent, we should interpret all the statements literally or metaphorically. So sounds pretty
nonsense.
good.
They would never in a trillion years do that.
Oh yeah. Let's just look at some examples, because I'm going to go to page 81. So this is one of their sections in this chapter on Deuteronomy 33.
Hey,
so,
one second though. I just wanted a quick response. So if it talks about he will see his offspring, if he will see his offspring, why would you interpret that metaphorically and not literally as literally having children? Well, because that's exactly what Jesus says in the context of his crucifixion. So they're saying, why are you interpreting the crucifixion literally, but this other part is metaphoric? That's exactly what Jesus does. He keeps talking about going and being crucified. And then in John, when he's talking about why he has to die, meaning literally, he says, if a grain of wheat falls to the ground and remains alone, it just remains a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. So dying is what produces the offspring, right? So that's what he says, that's what he's doing. So if he didn't have biological children, but he talks about his death leading to one seed becoming many seeds, Jesus does the same thing we're doing with the passage.
Well, they don't like that. Except when they do it. When they do it, it's okay, good to go. Let me show you. Again, Deuteronomy 33. So they want to say this is a prophecy. The Lord came from Sinai, and he rose up from Seir unto them. He shined forth from Mount Piran. He came with 10,000 saints. Okay. None of that mentions Muhammad. None of that does. It's talking about what Yahweh is doing. So, but what they want to say is the mention of Sinai is metaphorical for Moses. Seir is metaphorical for Jesus, and then Piran is metaphorical for Muhammad. Like they say, Seir is an allusion to Palestine, as Mount Seir was situated within the ancient kingdom of Edom, which was in Palestine. And like I point out, if you just look at, it's actually outside of Palestine, has nothing to do with Jesus. He's never been there. It doesn't mention any time going there. Like it's so weird.
Mm-hmm.
They did so it's okay for them to do metaphors.
Yeah,
but
everyone do you understand is saying Jesus is identified with Seir, which was outside of Israel. Why?
Right. Yeah.
Why not Jerusalem or something like that? Bethlehem.
Doesn't make any sense.
Nazareth, someplace he actually went to at some point.
Yeah. Doesn't make any sense. So and then you can just see it here. Then concerning God's first revelation, it says the Lord came in the second. In the second, it said, and rose up. Well, in the third, it said he shined forth. It seems the revelation of the Torah resembled the break of dawn, while the revelation of the gospel was like the rising of the sun. Light and guidance increased with it. Notice what they're doing. Deuteronomy 33 is just metaphors for the Torah, the gospel, and then the Quran. But it doesn't say that. So apparently it's okay for them to make metaphors out of these passages when it suits them, but then they attack Christians for that when it comes to Isaiah 53. Double standard. These authors are hypocrites. They didn't even think about this, that no one was going to call them out on this. It's pathetically stupid.
And it's just, I have to say, it is massive shirk, right? A passage says, Yahweh did this, Yahweh did that, Yahweh did this. And they say, hey, Yahweh here is Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad. So they just defended a weird version of the Trinity.
Right. Well, I mean, like the worst thing about this whole section is Deuteronomy 33 isn't a prophecy. Like I put all these quotes in.
It's a description.
In my notes. Like,
there's two interpretations. One, it's talking about the path of the Exodus because they had an actual pillar of cloud by day and pillar of cloud and pillar of fire by night to guide them and so on. So this is Yahweh making his way towards the promised land, or that it's talking about like the sun rising and it's rising over this and rising over that and rising over this and so on, and comparing that to God shining his light over everything.
Well, what I did in my notes is I just would add a ton of quotes. Like they'll say something stupid like this. It's a prophecy. They never justify it because they don't have a sound methodology. They just say Deuteronomy 33 is a prophecy. Don't challenge us on that. We're not going to justify it. So I just put a bunch of quotes in over here of scholars telling you what the passage is actually about, and it's not a prophecy. So that's the kind of stuff they do. I had one more funny metaphor they do, because you'll like this, because we were talking about this earlier in 2025, but they try to turn, I believe this is the section here. Yeah. Isaiah 9:6 is apparently a prophecy of Muhammad. You can't make this stuff. Isaiah 9:6 is a prophecy of Muhammad. And so what are they doing? They're saying when it says the government should be upon his shoulders, that's a metaphor. Look what they say. It's some kind of metaphor about power, or is an indication of some kind of physical mark upon the child's shoulders. So
are they arguing for the mole on his back?
They're arguing for the mole on his back. Yes. And what Isaiah is talking about, it's metaphorically referring to that when it says the government shall be upon his shoulders. So again,
it means he'll have a mole on his back. I've got a mole on my back. I guess that's about me.
But think, like the eternal Father, they have to interpret that as metaphorically Prince of Peace. Muhammad wasn't a prince, but I mean, like, I just cited Surah 33:40 here. Muhammad is not a father to any of your men. How could he be the eternal Father? This contradicts the Quran. And so, like, they'll just say things like, yeah, it's a physical badge. There's no scholars that are saying this. And if you go through their sources, it's just so bad. It's doesn't mean a physical mark. So I point out here, like, in no sense does emblem mean a physical mark. So one of the scholars they cite, Bleckensop, also appears alone in this translation. No modern translation renders the verse this way. He doesn't even think it's a physical mark. So that they cite Bleckensop's translation of this because it's good. He translates it as emblem, which excites them. Oh, that could be a physical mark. But if you go read what he says in his translation, he doesn't think it's a physical mark. Like he says whether the sequel to the birth corresponds to ceremonies carried out in the palace on this occasion, a ritual of investiture and the conferring of throne names, we do not know, but may consider quite likely emblems of sovereignty and attempt a render which occurs only here, may point to investitures with a robe or other symbols of authority, so that is placed on the shoulder. So he's not translating it as a physical mark.
So let me get this straight. We've got hundreds of translations of this passage. They go through hundreds of translations to find one that they can twist into, hey, this must be talking about a physical mark on his back. And you go to what the guy actually says, and hey, it may have been something like, when it says government is on his shoulders, it may have been like there's a robe of authority saying you're in charge of you control the land, and this may have referred to some sort of robe being placed on him. Well, okay, well, it's still got something, physical, and so maybe it sounds like it's just a mole.
Mm-hmm. It's insane. But remember, they were attacking Christians for putting a metaphor or interpreting one part of Isaiah 53 metaphorically. But this is what they do throughout the entire book. Anytime something doesn't line up with what Islam teaches, it's metaphorical. It's just, it's not literal, it's metaphorical. And that's the proof. Like it's that bad. So endless double standards throughout this book. No clear methodology. The stuff that it's so bad. Like they're doing this stuff and then they're criticizing Christians or Jews for doing the very things they're doing. Like, you can't make this stuff up. That's how bad their methodology is.
It's pretty terrible. Sounds pretty terrible, man.
It's pretty bad. Let's start going through the chapter on Daniel. So it's right after the servant one where they try to do Isaiah 42. As you can see, I have a ton of notes on this one as well. There's so much to cover in this. But let's do because the video we watched, they mentioned Daniel 2 and 7, as well as Deuteronomy 18:18. And Daniel 2 has been like their new favorite this past year until Libiano started talking to me on it. So they don't really they only deal with one issue in this. They'll go through the statue of Daniel. So in Daniel 2, you have the statue of Nebuchadnezzar, the head of gold, then the silver, the bronze, and then the legs of iron, then the feet of iron and clay. And they say that is Babylon, Medo-Persian, Macedonian, or Greece, and then the Roman Empire at the bottom. They don't deal with the fact that actually scholars have various different interpretations of this, They just they only respond to the traditional view, and they don't even consider the possibility of another interpretation. So as you can see, they're going through this. They're trying to show that, like all these kingdoms are what? And I'm like, okay, I'll grant all this. And then they get down here and they basically are like, all right, what they're basically arguing is the stone in Daniel 2 that is sent from heaven is the kingdom of Islam. And so they say historically it is only Islam which fulfills all these characteristics.
That's why we worship a stone. You see?
Now their point is that what they say is that, well, the stone comes during the time of the Roman Empire. And because it strikes at the feet, it has to come after Rome divides, which Daniel doesn't actually say. So Daniel doesn't actually say that. He just says in the days of those kings. So, which a lot of scholars think is just referring to the kings of the Roman Empire. John Walton thinks it could refer to any king after Nebuchadnezzar because it's very vague in what it's saying. But they say it has to refer to a king, the kings that came after Rome divided, which happened in 395. Therefore, the only kingdom that comes after that is Islam. And then they say Islam destroyed the Roman Empire. So that's the argument they try to make in this.
Powerful.
Now, very powerful, yes. Now, what they don't realize is that the stone is supposed to be different. Like, they never really address this point. Yeah, the stone is not a kingdom like the earthly kingdoms. The Islamic kingdom was just another earthly kingdom that subjugated people. So the earthly kingdoms are represented by layers in the statue. So why is the stone not just becoming another layer in the statue? Because it's not an earthly kingdom. It's a heavenly kingdom, as the text says. It's not going to do the same stuff that that the prior kingdoms did. It does something completely different, which would align with the kingdom of Christ being a spiritual kingdom that spreads over the world, is never destroyed. They want it to be the literal Islamic empire. That's their argument here. But I point out here, the stone is supposed to be different. It's supposed to be a kingdom different from the earthly kingdoms. Mm-hmm. Islam just created more empires. And then if you look at what scholars say, again, Aubrey Buster, John Walton, in their recent commentary, they say, scholars have identified the text represents a conundrum. If each successive kingdom has replaced the previous kingdoms, how can the kingdom of God destroy them all? Furthermore, why does each successive kingdom not destroy the preceding layer? The kingdom of God will not only destroy the final human-ruled kingdom, whatever that kingdom will be, but will end the phenomenon of empire itself. N.T. Wright, he says, the whole tottering structure of empires of the world would come down with a crash. The stone itself would grow to become a mountain, a new sort of kingdom, ruling the whole world in a new sort of way. That's the point of Daniel. The Islamic kingdom cannot be the stone because it's just ruling the way the earthly kingdoms ruled.
Exactly,
so they don't really
the same
address
way,
this.
Except more evil.
More evil, yeah. So here's what I point out. So they say, in the words of Daniel, Islam crushed and brought an end to the world empires at the time, including the mighty Romans and Persians. Okay, here's a simple question for you, David. So let's say that I don't know. We'll say Canada decided to conquer Britain, and well, let's not use Canada because that doesn't really make me. Let's say that Sweden decided to conquer Britain during the days of the British Empire, and then Sweden didn't dissolve the British Empire. They just asserted themselves as the new British emperors, started calling themselves the British, and then ruling over the British Empire. Would you say the British Empire had ended?
No.
Yeah. This is the thing. This is the thing they have been saying for over a year, and they never thought about it because they don't know the history. And when I was debating Libiano the other night, I asked him, did the Ottomans say they ended the Roman Empire? And he said, yes. That is demonstrably false. What the Ottomans did is when they conquered Constantinople in 1453, they didn't claim to end the Roman Empire. They claimed to become it, to inherit it, to continue it on. They wanted to turn the Roman Empire into a Muslim Roman Empire. And I quote 4 historians over here to show this. Over and over again, the Ottomans didn't claim to end the Roman Empire. They claimed to inherit it. The sultans called themselves Caesars. They adopted the administrative structures that were in Constantinople at that time. So, as look, this one historian says, I have at the top, Chris Wickham, he says, in some sense then, the Roman Empire lasted until the First World War, when the Ottoman state collapsed. So he's pointing out here
when the Ottoman Empire was crushed by Western nations.
Exactly. America is the stone, apparently, from heaven. But they just assume the Ottomans were just crushed Rome, when that is just not what they said. They claim to be the Romans. And here this other guy, Mark David Baer, points out that, yeah, even some other people considered themselves the Romans, but they explicitly said they were the Romans. They explicitly called themselves the Romans. Muslims were not aware of this until I pointed this out 2 nights ago in my debate with Libiano, and they're now shell-shocked from this. They have no idea what to do with this, so they're just mocking it because they have no idea what to do with this.
I have seen them mocking it.
Their entire argument for Daniel was contingent on the idea the Ottomans ended the Roman Empire in 1453. They now know, and they're shell-shocked, that the Ottomans just claimed to inherit the Roman Empire. They claimed to be the sultans, and that's why they kept pushing west and not east, because they were trying to reclaim lands that were traditional of the Roman Empire, and they never were successful. So they never destroyed Rome. They just...
So you're saying the reason the Ottomans were so obsessed with invading Europe is because they're like, hey, we're the Roman Empire, so this is our stuff.
Exactly. And when they were fighting with the Holy Roman Empire, they refused to call them Roman emperors because they were the Roman emperors. They'd call them like the German prince or the king of Spain, because they're like, we're not going to dignify you with a title that we only should have. So think about that.
So hang on. So you're saying that the Muslims who are mocking you over what the Ottomans themselves claimed they were, when Muslims are saying they are the ones who fulfilled the prophecy. The Ottomans fulfilled the prophecy, and you're saying you look at what the Ottomans said. They said the Ottomans didn't think they were doing that. They thought they are the Roman Empire.
Exactly. Now, they're saying that I'm saying the Ottomans are the Roman Empire. I don't think they are. I think the Roman Empire ended in 1204, which we'll get to in a bit. But by their own logic, they cannot say the Roman Empire ended in 1453. One of the reasons is, and I'll get to the other important reason in a bit, but one of the reasons is the Ottomans didn't claim to end the Roman Empire. They just claimed to take it over, to inherit it. But this happened throughout the Roman Empire's history. Look at the Byzantines. So the Roman Empire started in Rome, then they spread east. Then it divides. And then we start calling the eastern side the Byzantine Empire. Why? Because they didn't speak Latin. They were not ethnically Italian. They weren't even ruling over Rome. So we're like, they're really Byzantines. So they're different ethnicity. They speak a different language. How are they Roman? They're Roman in name only. Just like the Ottomans. Like, that's the point. If you're going to say the Byzantines are the Roman Empire because they inherited it from ancient Rome, why aren't the Ottomans by that same standard? So explain that one. They can't. They don't have a good, clear metric to say the Roman Empire ended in 1453. Therefore, they cannot say that Islam crushed the Roman Empire, which they identify as the bottom of Daniel's statue. Their entire case for using Daniel to prove Islam is thrown out the window with just a little bit of historical analysis. And guys, if you're watching, you go into TikTok debates, you go into those things, use this argument, they will be shell-shocked by it.
They'll just mock it. And so I would say, if you want to point this out, just repeatedly keep saying, this is what the Ottomans said, and you're saying the Ottomans fulfilled the prophecy when the Ottomans didn't think they were doing that at all.
Right. I like what they say here. The Muslim empire spread rapidly throughout the world and went on to become the greatest that the world had ever seen. And I'm like, greatest in terms of what? It wasn't the largest or the longest lasting. Like, what? They just say they say dumb stuff like this and never defend it.
Oh, and it's extremely dumb because, isn't this supposed to be dominant forever? And like, what are you Muslims running right now? You guys you can't make a functioning country where anyone wants to live. So you keep running to Western nations. Can you take me in? Can you take me in? This is your idea of a powerful empire.
Yep. They say Muhammad and his companions were godly in character. When Muhammad raped a 9-year-old, when he owned and traded slaves, that's what I'm saying over here. He said he was made victorious because of terror. He taught that apostates should be killed. He gave permission for husbands to beat wives. He said he would expel all the Jews and Christians from Arabia. This is what is godly character? No, they just say this kind of crap. And so then I had to sit here and I'm like, all right, let me find some stuff on Muhammad being the total douchebag that he was. Like, this is why it took so long to go through this book the second time. Like, it's just insanely stupid.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah. So again, they say this is Islam. Here's where I point this out here. Okay. Daniel 2 says this kingdom needs to last forever. Now, what they say to this is they go, well, it's just hyperbole. Like, Central Dawah did that in his debate with you. What?
I don't recall, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, he said that this was hyperbole when it says the kingdom will last forever. And then they'll point to places where the word olam in Hebrew refers to times that it doesn't last forever. Well, what they don't realize is that Daniel 2 is talking about it lasting forever and not being destroyed, completely unstipulated. So I point out that the scholar Sacha Stern says olam means permanent. Now that's important because we translate olam often in the Bible to mean eternity or forever. That he's pointing out that's actually incorrect. Kind of. It more basically means permanent. You could refer to everlasting, but it doesn't really have temporal sense. Now, why is that important? Because permanent can refer to things that are temporary if they're stipulated. So take the Mosaic covenant. God will say, like, the priests of Aaron have to do this ritual, olam, which we translate as forever, which doesn't make sense because they're not doing it now. Well, if you translate that as permanent, it makes sense because what God is saying is this is a permanent stipulation of the Mosaic covenant. As long as the Mosaic covenant is in effect, this permanent ritual has to be performed. But if the Mosaic covenant is broken, you don't have to do that. Same in like Jeremiah. Jeremiah says a permanent aspect of the punishment is that the land will be desolate. Okay, yeah, but once the punishment is over, the land won't be desolate anymore. So it's not actually meaning, olam doesn't mean long period of time. It just means permanent. And when you recognize that, a lot of the supposed passages that just mean that they use to argue that olam just means long time fade away. You understand the context. Guess what happens in Daniel 2? The kingdom of God is talked about as a permanent kingdom, unstipulated. What happened at World War I? The caliphate was abolished, which they're trying to use. Therefore, once again, the Islamic caliphate cannot be the kingdom of Daniel 2 because it wasn't a permanent kingdom. Once again, they've debunked themselves.
Yeah, they had a caliphate for a while. Then they lost their caliphate. No idea how they're going to get their caliphate back because they can't stop fighting with each other over everything.
Yeah, so they'll quote someone like historian Edward Gibbon, which is ridiculous, severely outdated. They do this a lot. They're citing sources that are outdated. Now, they get to Daniel 7 down here, and they're trying to say that Daniel 7 is also fulfilled in Islam. Guess who they identify as the little horn?
Don't know.
It's pretty obvious, but it's so obvious. You just got to think about who do they hate? Who's one of the people they hate the most throughout Christian history? One of them. It's not Paul, but who's the second most?
The Roman emperor.
Yeah, Constantine.
Yeah.
So they say the little horn is Constantine, and this is like their big thing. But here's something they sort of admit. So in Daniel 7, it says there out of the fourth beast, there are 10 horns, and these represent 10 kings. Okay? And the little horn comes out and puts down 3 of them. But they can't identify the 10 kings. So they attack Christians for trying to identify what the 10 horns or the 10 kings represent. But they say, so we can see that there is not enough information provided by Daniel in order for us to be able to reliably identify which of Rome's 10 rulers constitute the 10 horns. So they say that Daniel perfectly describes the coming of Islam, but they can't describe this. What are you doing? That's ridiculous. So you're admitting defeat. But here, they point out here that, the little horn is Constantine who comes. And here's what they say.
So not Antiochus?
Not Antiochus, no. It's Constantine. So Constantine was quite literally the little horn that rose up, as Daniel puts it. Soon after his ascension, a series of civil wars broke out among the four rulers, with Constantine emerging triumphant over his three rivals and ending up as a sole ruler of the Roman Empire in 324. So you come away with these. Now, I've studied the history of Constantine. A couple years ago, I did a video called The Top 10 Myths About Constantine. So when I read this, I was like, I knew right away this was factually incorrect. So here's what I put in my notes. Constantine had more than three rivals: Maxentius, Maximinus Daia, Maximian, Galerius, Severus II. Okay, then you have Maxentius' son, Licinius. If you're only counting rivals that Constantine directly had to fight, it's only two. So therefore, Daniel 7 could not be referring to Constantine because he didn't have just three rivals and he only fought two directly. So what are you doing here? They're making things up to fit their needs. But yeah, this is the kind of crap they're pulling throughout this work. They're trying to make Constantine the little horn. And the reason why they're doing this is dumber than you think. The reason why they're doing this, David, is because, let me see if I can find it really fast. Because it's you'll be surprised. It's a little further down they go into this. Let me see. It's where they talk about, where Daniel talks about the saints will be given into his in time and a half. Yeah. So the reason why what they do here is they translate this times, and half a time as centuries. That's what they're saying. They're saying that the times, and a half a times in Daniel 7 refers to a century, 2 centuries, and then a half a century.
So 3.5 centuries, and so they're going to do the math and find Muhammad 3.5 centuries after Constantine.
You guessed it. Yeah, that's exactly what they do. So let me see if I can find it really fast here. Yeah, here it is. Yeah. So what do? They go from the year Constantine was born to the time of the Hijra. That's what they're doing here. Which is stupid. It's Daniel 7 says, and they shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. So the moment Constantine was born, he was oppressing Muslims, apparently. Like, what sort of nonsense are you trying to do here? This is the kind of crap we're dealing with in this book. But yeah, I had to add extensive notes on this to just sort of show, like, they'll try to say the 490 weeks in Daniel 9 is also referring to Islam. They think they can count from the Bar Kokhba rebellion to, again, the Hijra, 622 again, which doesn't make sense because if you read Daniel, it talks about the temple being destroyed after the 70 weeks. The temple wasn't destroyed in 622 or after. It had already been destroyed. So it can't be about that. This is the kind of nonsense they're pulling in this book. I wish I was making it up, but it's this bad.
So I guess we can see why Daniel Kikachu, another Daniel, is such a big fan of low IQ societies.
So here's the other point I want to make. This is where they say, yes, in the year 1453, this is when the Muslim Ottoman Empire destroyed the Roman Empire. But I did a little more research on this. And the simple thing we need to ask is, why do a lot of historians assign the date of 1453 to the end of the Roman Empire? Now, this is important as well. In truth, there is no good reason. They assign it because it's an arbitrary date that's useful for Western historians to categorize things. This happens a lot. Like, when did America start? We say July 4th, 1776. Well, why not July 2nd? That's when they started signing the Declaration of Independence. Why don't we start at the end of the Revolutionary War when Britain recognized us, or when the Constitution was implemented, because that came later? We set an arbitrary date just for our useful categorizations. There's many other dates we could have selected. It's kind of the same thing. The reason they set this date as 1453 is because an outside force comes in and destroys what remains of the Byzantines and takes over. Okay, so end of that. However, if that's your metric for deciding the end of the Roman Empire, you have to say the Roman Empire ended in 1204, as the historian Edward J. Watts points out in his book from just last year, The Romans. So this is very up-to-date scholarship here. He points out that in 1204, the Latin Crusaders came in, they conquered Constantinople. Then they set up that they called themselves the Roman emperors, and the Byzantines fled to three different areas: the Despotate of Epirus, the Empire of Trebizond, and the Empire of Nicaea. But none of them were calling themselves Roman emperors. So Edward J. Watts notes, that's probably the best time we can say the Roman Empire ended, because you have a definitive line from ancient Rome of emperors up to this point, and then finally the succession is over. Outside invaders come in, conquer the city, set up their own empire. Now, eventually, the people that were ruling at Nicaea, the Byzantines there, retake Constantinople in, I believe, 1261. But they never reconquer the land, like the Empire of Trebizond, the remaining Crusader states, the Empire or the Despotate of Epirus, for example. So if you're going to say that the end of the Roman Empire is in 1453 because the Ottomans came in and conquered it, you have to say that it was also destroyed in 1204 because the Latins came in and conquered it, set themselves up as their own empire, called themselves emperors. So you have to go with that date. If that's the case, you can't say that what ended the Roman Empire was the Ottomans. Because here's why. Let's put all this together now. If you're going to conclude that in 1204 the Latin emperors were the Roman emperors because they came outside force, came in, invaded, conquered the city, claimed to be the Roman emperors, by that same metric, you have to conclude the Ottomans are also Roman emperors because outside force comes in, invades, calls themselves Roman emperors. What's the difference between the 1204 and the 1453? It's just different people doing it. So does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think Watts is right. I think it makes far more sense to say the Roman Empire ended in 1204. And what conquered Constantinople later was a rump state that was ruling from Nicaea that just claimed to be the Roman emperor. Just like the Latin emperors were claiming. Just like the Holy Roman emperors were claiming. Just like the Ottomans were claiming. So what is the actual metric for saying the Roman Empire ended in 1453? It's arbitrary. And if you use that as your date, you accidentally admit the Roman Empire ended before that in 1204 or after, depending on what metric you're using. So that's the problem that Muslims don't seem to recognize. Therefore, they cannot say at all that Islam ended the Roman Empire. Therefore, that destroys their whole argument that they are the stone that destroyed the fourth kingdom. And that ruins their entire interpretation of Daniel. It collapses into nothing.
Well, yeah, because you're not using their methodology, which is to pick and choose whatever works.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look what they do here. They said the word translated as judgment in Aramaic is deen.
Arabic.
This is the very same word in Arabic that the Quran uses to describe the religion of Muhammad. It's an association fallacy. Aramaic deen means judgment. And then if you were to put that in like verses like 10 and 26, the court sat in deen. This would make no sense to translate this with the Arabic meaning for deen. So this is the kind of crap they pull, but they don't actually think about how stupid it is.
Well, they don't care because their fans are not going to catch on how stupid it is.
Yeah. So the major takeaway from this section before we move on to Deuteronomy 18 is pretty clear. They're going to argue that Islam is the stone from heaven because it ended the Roman Empire. So learn a little bit of the history I've gone over here and in my debate with Libiano, and I'm going to put out a video on this soon as well.
You might need to do like chapter by chapter videos, man, throughout the year.
Oh yeah, we're talking about that as well. But show them, like, learn a little bit of history of the Roman Empire, and if they're going to say the Roman Empire ended in 1453 because an outside force conquered and took over, they have to conclude it ended in 1204 because that happened there. If they're going to say, well, no, they get to be the Roman emperors when they did that in 1204, then so do the Ottomans do when they conquered it in 1453. Either way, they lose. Islam did not end the Roman Empire. And by the way, they're still the Holy Roman Empire. They have to deal with. They never deal with this because if they're going to say, well, yeah, the Roman Empire was destroyed in 1204, but it came back and rebuilt itself up. Great. Then that's what happened to the Western Roman Empire. It fractured, but then it came back as the Holy Roman Empire. Convinced? They're not going to be. So you should be convinced that's what happened in 1261 when the Byzantines at Nicaea retook Constantinople. So you learn some of these simple things about history, you can destroy their entire case. They'll drop this argument because they don't want to deal with the complexity of history, and they'll move on to other lies they're going to use.
That sounds like them.
Yeah. Let's go to Deuteronomy 18 because that's the other thing we saw them using. This first chapter on Genesis 17 is garbage. I can't even like explain how bad this stuff is. Just like when you're going through it, you're surprised. Like they actually try to make a case that no, originally Genesis said Ishmael was the child offered up because we just cherry pick the parts we like. It's really, really ridiculous. But so here's the chapter on Deuteronomy 18:18. So they're just some preliminary stuff. They'll say like one example of general characteristics of Moses was performing miracles, but lots of prophets after Moses performed miracles. Why point out the Quran says Muhammad didn't perform miracles? That's absurd. It's absurd. So put out contradictions between the Torah and the Quran.
Wait, did they say Muhammad? Did they say Muhammad performed miracles?
They do later in this book. I don't think they say it here though.
Yeah, I'm about to make a video about that coming up this week because of Sheikh Uthman's fake little AI debate between me and him.
Oh, that's good. So here's where they make the case, and we've heard it 1,000 times. It's that, it says in Deuteronomy 18:18, I will raise up a prophet like me from among your brethren, from among your brothers. And they go, well, Yahweh or Moses is talking to Israel. If he's talking to Israel, the brothers of Israel were people like the Edomites or the Ishmaelites. So that's where the prophet has to come from. Okay. Of course, this is rejected by unanimous scholarship. And I give you a bunch of quotes over here on the side.
Because it's insane and idiotic and contradicts earlier in the chapter and contradicts the previous chapter, and none of it makes any sense.
Yeah. You can find this throughout. I mean, Deuteronomy 1:16, 3:18, 20, Deuteronomy 15:17, 17:15, 18:15, 24:14. Over and over again, that when it's an unqualified phrase, your brothers, it always refers to Israelites. And then I point out, when it's referring to people that are not Israelites, it's always qualified to refer to the people of Israel. And the Ishmaelites are never called the brothers of Israel. This doesn't work. And then I just quote a bunch of scholars saying, yeah, this is an Israelite prophet. Every scholar I can find on this is saying that it's an Israelite prophet. So it destroys their whole case.
And I'm sure these guys do it, but if they don't, tons of Muslims do. When Muslims argue for Muhammad based on the expectation of the Jewish leaders in John 1:19 to 21, when they asked John the Baptist, are you the Messiah? No. Are you the prophet? No. Are you Elijah? And so they say, you see, they were expecting three different individuals, and that must mean that their expectation is correct. They definitely would have gotten their expectations correct. And therefore, since they were expecting the prophet to be different from the Messiah, therefore, Jesus can't be the prophet. Mm-hmm. And they argue that. And then, of course, you can point out very, very, very quickly, well, if their expectation was correct, who did they go to and ask if he's the prophet? They went to John the Baptist to ask if he's the prophet. Who did they go to? A Jew. Why didn't they go to an Arab if they knew that their expectations were correct? And Muslims will say, their expectations was wrong. Like, wait a minute, your entire argument from John 1 is based on their expectation being correct.
Now, they do.
And so it's another example of like the Talmud and like picking and choosing rabbis and so on.
Now, they do try to address it in here, that they try to make the case they didn't know John the Baptist's lineage. That's what they try to argue. They didn't know where he came from. So maybe he was a Gentile is what they say in this.
Wait, what?
Yeah, we can get to that in a minute. Yeah, they do respond to this by trying to say, well, maybe they didn't know who John was. Like they said, like they try to argue Elijah was a Gentile prophet. So they asked him if he's Elijah. So therefore, they didn't know if he was a Jew or a Gentile is what they do here.
Wait, so, I mean, even in the Quran, they've got the story of Zechariah and so on in the temple and giving birth to
Yeah.
John and
Yep. So according to it contradicts the Quran, because the Quran teaches that he was a Jew, but they don't think about that at all. But so, yeah. So here this is, no prophet ever arose again in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew with such great intimacy. Notice they take the one translation. Again, they jump around for different translations. Here they're using the ISV because they don't want it to say face to face. Now, what they're doing with
little
this,
little side note, as you'll be making videos this year, that's like a separate little video, just translation hopping. And you say, hey, look at the translation they go with here. Why? Because here are the other translations. Notice none of them can be used to defend their point. And then look at the next quote. Oh, it's from a completely different translation. Why do they go with that? Oh, because even if they went with the translation they used in the previous verse, it wouldn't work. So they ultimate cherry pickers. You've never seen. These guys should seriously get a cherry farm because they are the best cherry pickers of all time.
Now, what they're arguing, though, is that this verse actually should be translated as, no prophet will ever again arise in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew with such great intimacy. Now, they quote a minority view in scholarship, this Joseph Bleckensop, who actually argues this. He says, in all instances where the particular construction occurs in the Hebrew Bible, it never means not yet, with the implication it hasn't happened yet, but will later. Following attested usage, it must, on the contrary, be translated as never again, never since, no longer. So what they think is that, what they're trying to argue is that the prophet of Deuteronomy 18:18 can't be an Israelite, because they think Deuteronomy 34:10 should be translated as, no prophet will ever again arise in Israel like Moses. So it's got to be a Gentile, right? What are they doing? It's outdated scholarship, okay? David de Jong responded to Bleckensop in his book, A Prophet Like Moses. And I give you extended quotes so you see his argument. But there's a very simple argument he makes to show this is wrong. He says in a footnote, he says, if editors had truly wished to roll out an eschatological reading, they would have used the imperfect tense of perfect. So meaning never again. So he basically points out the grammar of this doesn't suggest that, because they would have used the imperfect tense. This is an ongoing process. There will never again be a prophet like Moses in Israel. But he uses the perfect tense, meaning it just hasn't happened up till the time that the author was writing, which could include prophets that came after him, like Jesus. So again, outdated scholarship. This stuff has been thoroughly addressed. And I also point out here, most scholars see this as a reference to their not having been a prophet like Moses. But they go with the minority position because it supports their view, and they don't respond to the arguments that debunk them. This is the kind of stuff we get in this book. And so, again, I've had a bunch of quotes in there for other creators to use. See it in there, for example. So, again, this is the kind of stuff they're pulling when you're going through this book. So yeah, they're trying to defend this. They'll quote scholars like Joel Baden, for example, to say that, you know, he argues that, yeah, the Deuteronomy 34:10 means a prophet like Moses can never happen. But Joel Baden thinks the Deuteronomy 18:18 passage is about an Israelite. Like all the prophets they quote, they think is about an Israelite. Then they'll quote this rabbi. But if you look at they'll say like, well, yeah, he's referring to a prophet not arising in Israel. But if you look at the context, so I tracked down the original quote, and what Mark B. Shapiro is saying about this rabbi is he's not saying that the prophet won't be an Israelite. It's saying that this guy thought that he would be an Israelite who was just going to arise outside of Israel. So again, this is where they're dishonest with the people they're quoting, and I had to go track this down to find out what it was actually saying. It wasn't saying what they were claiming, but this is the kind of stuff that happens throughout this, over and over again.
Look, man, hey, you could make like short videos like daily, just on individual points. Like, hey, in this chapter they quoted this. What happens when we actually look at it? Oh, now look what they did. And those are just build up and build up and build up.
Well, I mean, I sent all my notes to, you, GodLogic, Thaddeus, everyone, so that we can all do this. Everyone should be going through these notes that's a creator and just making videos like this. So even there, I emailed a scholar, David Schreiner, to talk about this, because they try to say, well, if you go to Deuteronomy 18:1,
Okay, it's talking about the Levites, and it says your brothers who were outside of the tribe of Levi. So I emailed him to ask him about this kind of stuff, and here's what he responds to this. So they say, according to the Hebrew dictionaries, the Hebrew word for brother that is used in Deuteronomy 18:18 can mean brother of the same parents, half-brother, or relative. So he says the fact that brethren, kin are likely defined by the covenantal ethos, that is, brethren or kin, reaches beyond the here and now, i.e. the assembly, and foreseeing the community in the future still being defined by the covenantal agreement. It's hard for me to see Ishmael as the best or even a better referent here. He has been introduced and then quickly is dismissed in the biblical narrative. He's not even on the radar in the biblical narrative. The referent has to fall within the guidelines set forth by the biblical narrative, which makes them an Israelite prophet. So this is the kind of stuff they're doing. But I mean, again, the scholarly community just is thoroughly convinced the prophet of Deuteronomy 18:18 has to be an Israelite. It can't be Muhammad. So it destroys their entire case. They ignore that. Here's where the thing you were talking about. Oh, so wait, no, let me move on ahead a little bit here. Let's get to the point about Jesus, because they have another list here, and they go right to what you were talking about. Ah, here it is. So this is, again, the passage in John. So John 1:19-21. Okay. They're like, well, look, they ask, is he the Messiah? Is he Elijah or the prophet? That means they think the Messiah and the prophet are different people. It's like, you guys are quoting the villains. You're quoting the villains of the Gospel of John, the people that are made out to be ignorant. Like, because what do we see? The Gospel of John over and over again identifies the prophet as Jesus, like over and over again. So as you can see, John.
Yeah, these are the same guys who reject Jesus as the Messiah because he doesn't match their expectations. And then.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here, look at this. Like, you get John 1:45. They identify Jesus as the prophet. John 6:14. This is the prophet that is indeed come into the world. When they heard these words, some of the people said, this is really the prophet. Okay. What does Jesus say? John 5:46. For if you believed Moses, you would believe me, for he wrote of me. I mean, again, scholars are pretty clear. John thinks the prophet is Jesus. And Jesus also constantly alludes back to this passage about, because it says Yahweh is going to put his words in his mouth. So Jesus is often saying that, he speaks just as the Father taught him. My teaching is not mine, it is he who sent me. He's constantly alluding back to that passage to say that he is the prophet. So again, Jesus thinks he is the prophet of Deuteronomy 18. So if you go on what these guys, you make Jesus into a liar, because, that's what happens here. It's just over and over again, blunder after blunder with these guys. I mean, I don't know. Like, here's something interesting. Like, they'll quote Exodus 20 or Exodus 23:20, which they then connect to the prophet for some reason. Like, really, really weird argument. So they're saying that, okay, well, the Deuteronomy talks about this coming prophet, but Exodus 23 talked about a messenger going before Israel. And Malachi 3 talks about a messenger going before God. Well, this all has to be Muhammad. But if you actually read the passage in Exodus 23, what does he say in verse 20? So he says, my angel will go before you to bring you into the land of the Amorites, Hittites, etc. Okay. God is talking about his messenger. What does he say in verse 25? You shall serve the Lord your God, and he will bless your bread and your water, and I will take sickness away from among you. So Yahweh is saying his angel is Yahweh. But that's supposed to be Muhammad? Doesn't make any sense. But yeah, this is the kind of crap we're dealing with here. I tried to be thorough as I possibly could in debunking this. There's so much I threw in here. Let me get to another interesting part. Oh yeah, this is where they here's what the thing they try to do here. So let me go back up a little ahead. Let me find the place, because they take issue with Deuteronomy 17:15. Okay, so they'll bring up Deuteronomy 17:15.
As they should, because it destroys their position.
It destroys their position, absolutely. And so what do they say? Well, that was added in later. They'll be like, well, that was added in later. You can't trust that part. Well, I mean, what is their reasoning? They already told you at the end of the book, if it agrees with Islam, it's unreliable. If it doesn't agree with Islam, it's not reliable. But I mean, like, the other thing to keep in mind is, let me see if I can find the note here. Should be Karsten is what I put it in, is there. Yeah, perfect. Here we go. So here's where they say this means that God had not given the law recorded in Deuteronomy 17:15. They think they got a checkmate here. Aha, we win. That was added in later. Well, again, updated scholarship actually makes a case that points out through a lot of evidence, and I did a whole video on this, which I linked here for people who want to see it. I did a whole video showing that actually, no, the law of Deuteronomy 17:15 is very ancient. Karsten Vong says it appears to stem from a period where Israel has not yet any direct experience with monarchy as governmental system, but would be tempted to adopt the value system of ancient Near Eastern kingdom together with the very notion of royal government. In other words, this seems to be original Deuteronomy. There's no reason to argue it's been added in. He responds to a lot of that stuff. But also notice what they do. They just respond to Deuteronomy 17:15. They don't respond to Deuteronomy 24:14, Deuteronomy 3:18-20, or the other passages I cited, which show that, yeah, there's many other places like these ones here. Here they are on the list where your brothers refers to Israelites. They don't seem to realize there are other places. They just assumed it was just the Deuteronomy 17:15 passage in 18:15. But they didn't realize there were other places.
Because that's the one we normally go to, because it's just a chapter earlier.
Right, exactly. Let me see if I can find the 18:15 thing here. And then, so let me see here. Yeah. So here's where they try to address, I believe it's 18:15. This is a big one for them because 18:15 says, God will raise up a prophet like me from you, from your brothers. And so what they try to argue is from you was added in later. And they're trying to say that it was actually added in after Islam. Like, they actually try to make this case. Well, thanks to a friend that Jai hooked me up with, he did a lot of good research on this, was able to get me this stuff. He points out that no, it's actually this reading of Deuteronomy in the Masoretic here. So the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from your brothers. That's in Origen's Hexapla. And we have manuscripts that predate Islam to the 4th or 5th century. Therefore, the reading predates Islam. And scholars are pretty much convinced this is the most likely original reading. So I put in a bunch of notes on that as well. Here's all the scholarly sources that are pointing this out. The original reading was probably like me from among you, from your brothers. And then sometimes they dropped out from among you because it was just repetitive. But so again, they try to pretend this was added in after the rise of Islam to hide the prophecy. No evidence of that. And again, it shows up in Origen's Hexapla, meaning it predates Islam. So again, they're lying.
I can't believe they're lying.
It's all over the place. Let me show you a funny one. I'm going to go to page 14. This is kind of funny. Okay, so notice what they do here. They want to throw out Genesis 15:13-17 because they think it's unreliable. You can't use this. Richard Elliott Freeman says this part was added in later. Therefore, if we remove these redacted verses from Genesis 15, then there is no longer any reference to Isaac or his descendants. Funny story. Just about 20 pages later, they're quoting Genesis 15:13-17 as if it's reliable. You can't make this stuff up. And by the way, they don't even get the reference right because this is actually Genesis 15:13-18. They didn't include that. But they go on. What'd I do? Never mind. I hit a button on my thing. Anyway, but they go on to quote this as if this is reliable. They try to use it to argue for Islam again. Because they're trying to say, well, God didn't actually give Abraham all that land. He didn't give them the land from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river Euphrates. Wrong. If you go read 1 Kings 4:21, as I point out here, that's the borders of Solomon's kingdom. So the Israelites did fulfill this. They don't ever even attempt to address this, though. It's like they weren't even aware this was in the Bible. But this is the kind of stuff. This is how sloppy this research is. I'm telling you, it's bad.
Seems pretty terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Really, all I'm seeing over and over again is just cherry picking every single argument.
Yeah.
And in other
Here's another one.
in other words, for any passage or anything else, it's what do we want? What do we want to be the case here to tie this to Islam? And let's go to everything in the universe that's ever been written about it. Cherry pick a couple of things that we can twist into something in favor of us, and then throw out everything else.
Right.
Because that's what we have to do.
They try to argue Piran refers to Mecca, the land of the Ishmaelites. But I mean, you just go through the passages. Okay, no, El Piran is around Seir. This is where it says in Genesis 14. Okay, Piran is in the wilderness after they left Sinai. So it's got to be north of Sinai. Also, it says Kadesh is in Piran. Kadesh, we know where Kadesh is. It's in southern Israel. Like, and of course, then what they'll do in the book, they'll address this passage, but they won't ever address any of these ones. It's like they don't even know they exist. But they think if they just address this one, they debunk the whole argument. And
well, because that is when it sounds like they respond to ones that they're familiar with because we bring them up. So that one like there.
Right.
They set out from Midian and came to Piran and took men with them from Piran and came to Egypt, to Pharaoh, king of Egypt. If you just look at a map and you're like, oh, well, it makes sense if Piran is right here on your way to Egypt. If you think, oh, we're going to Piran down in the middle of the Arabian desert, it makes no sense. That was not how any sane person would get to Egypt from Midian. No one's going, hey, let me go way down here for no point whatsoever, and then back up. So anyway, that's right. Why we bring that up. I don't know what they responded, but that's why we don't.
They try to say that they'd have to go through Israel and they would have been caught. And it's like they think like the borders of Israel are like the modern border of America. Like there's going to be checkpoints or something. It's incredibly stupid. They could have just gone through the desert undetected. That would be the expected route. So they think they're going to go south to Mecca first and then take a boat across. It's incredibly ad hoc, but doesn't matter. They don't address all these other verses. And if you take all these verses combined, you're not going to come away with the idea Piran is around Mecca. You're going to come away with that it's southern Israel, kind of like northeast of Sinai area, because that's what the data shows in the Bible. But this is the kind of stuff that we're dealing with. They don't actually address the whole case because it's like they're not aware what the Bible is saying. So bad in so many ways. I don't know if you have any other questions. I've been kind of rambling for a while. I could just keep going all night, but not sure what else you want me to get to.
You know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking that as we make videos on various topics, then we go live, go through the video, and then look at what they have to say and see why it's so terrible. You know what I mean? In other words, revisit their specific arguments as we make video content throughout the year.
Yep. And yeah, I'll make videos from this. I encourage other creators to make videos from this. If you just want the PDF, I can email it to you. I'll email you the PDF of all my notes specifically. So yeah, there's so much here. They'll also flip flop. They'll flip flop between quoting the Hebrew Masoretic and then the Septuagint. So like they'll want to use the Septuagint for Psalm 84, but they won't use it for Isaiah 42 because in Isaiah 42 in the Septuagint it directly says the servant is Israel. So they avoid that like the Black Plague, That's what they're kind of doing here. They'll go back. Which is more reliable, the Septuagint or the Hebrew Masoretic? They don't know. If it just agrees with Islam, that's the more reliable one. But this is the kind of crap throughout this book. It's bad over and over again. I cannot tell you how many times I just had to stop, track down sources, point out it was nonsense. They do not know anything when it comes to this stuff.
And so apparently this is the most powerful case for Muhammad in the Bible, ladies and gentlemen.
Most powerful case. And this is just a sample. Again, I could go for like another 3 hours. My voice would start to go, it'd crack a lot more. But yeah, I went through every single chapter. Just, you can see anytime there's a highlight, I had to stop and make a note. So I took like 3 to 4 months on and off, about 3 to 4 months on and off to just sort of go through this stuff and just point out errors after errors, talking with some other people. So not all the notes are mine. I did work with some other people, like the friend that Jai hooked me up with. He gave me some places where, like, I could show you a good one that he found, which was pretty based, and he put it on one of his articles on academia. So they say in the Dead Sea Scrolls, this is talking about Deuteronomy 33. They say in the Dead Sea Scrolls, it says he came with 10,000 of his holy ones at his right hand with a fiery law for them. But this is incorrect, as it's pointed out over here. There's only 2 fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls, okay? And they don't contain fiery law. What they did was they went to this website, and they didn't realize that this website adds in words they think were originally there based on what the Masoretic was saying. But they just copy and pasted from that and didn't point out that fiery law is missing in the Dead Sea Scrolls. This is how sloppy they are. They didn't realize on the website fiery law is in italics, meaning it's missing. The website even says words in italic cannot be seen in the scroll. What do they do over here? They put it in as if it's in the scroll. Sloppy, like just very sloppy, very, very deceptive.
Now, hang on, Mike. Hang on. Don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, this is not supposed to be an argument that makes Muslims feel better, right? This is supposed to be an argument for Jews and Christians who find Muhammad mentioned in our scriptures. So we go, whoa, we believe in our scriptures, and our scriptures mention Muhammad. Now, IP, they've had 14 centuries to come up with this as their best case. You've read the book twice.
Yeah.
Did this affect your, you know how this works. You're supposed to update your confidence level in various hypotheses as new information comes in. So you had an entire book worth of information presented to you to defend the claim that Muhammad is mentioned in the Bible. How did this book affect your confidence in the hypothesis that Muhammad is prophesied as a prophet in our scriptures?
I have never been less convinced after reading this book. And like, it's there was not a place that I was like, oh wow, good argument, I should consider that. There were just places where like, what the heck did they just say? That doesn't make any sense. I got to spend like 2 hours looking this stuff up going, yeah, that's what I thought. Like what? Because like sometimes I'm like pulling quotes, like right above this, they say, when they're talking about, they go to the Septuagint reading for Deuteronomy 33 because they say it's with the 10,000 of Cades on his right hand, and then they want to translate that as like an army, but Cades is just a reference to Kadesh. And so like, I remember this part, I'm going like, Cades, wait, that doesn't sound like what they think it means. And I have to go look it up and I'm like, oh yeah, it's referring to Kadesh. Here's what the experts say. Like, this is the kind of stuff, man.
Powerful, awesome stuff, man. I think we're going to have a fun year. Man. We'll still keep pushing the Islamic dilemma, and we will sadly, reluctantly expose all of this nonsense, leaving them shattered and weeping that they have lost their last remaining argument for Muhammad.
Look, and again, all of this is just a trivial exercise because, again, what do they say at the end of the book? This is an entirely circular argument. So even if they were right and they weren't just constantly lying throughout the book, they've admitted at the end this is a circular argument. It's an exercise in mental gymnastics because all they're doing is assuming Islam, then they're able to pick out the reliable parts of the Bible, and then they use those parts to argue for Islam. This page alone debunks the entire book, and none of the 3 authors over the 5 years they spent on this realized this.
So, guys, at the end of the day, the best that Dawah has been able to come up with in defending Muhammad and the Bible is fundamentally, indisputably circular. It's a big circle of cherry picking.
Mm-hmm. Yep. If anybody wants to put a super chat in and ask me a question about the book, I can do that now, but I'm fine closing this out after that because it's getting late. I'm tired.
You want to keep this on the screen, you said?
Yeah, we can do that if anybody wants to, like, ask something about the book or something.
Anyone wants to ask about particular things in the book, now's your chance. As you're coming up with those, we'll zoom through these other ones. D. Wood, react to Goat Hub's hate song on Mike Winger. I don't need a song to help me hate on Mike Winger. Why not a whole year on moral issues with Momo? Well, we're trying to take out their arguments, but that is one, like Muhammad's character, that is one. So, but we kind of always go after that when we talk about Muhammad. Jesus matches perfectly with Moses. Many cool charts with verses comparing from their birth to their ministry, priestly, liberator role. No one else who fits prophet like Moses, like Jesus did. That's true. And definitely not Muhammad. He didn't fit any of the relevant features. As a Catholic, I declare infallibly all practicing Christians are brothers and sisters in Christ. Then we will humiliate you. Allah doesn't correct, he asserts. Biggest dilemma. Yeah. This almost feels like IP wearing his teaching assistant hat, thoroughly baking his F student's essay. Love you, IP, and D-Wood too. I must say, you destroyed Duck Lips. There is level to this, but you were too nice and generous.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, here's the thing. Marlon said, don't insult. And so I was not going to stoop to Libiano's level and act like him. So I was just going to show how he was wrong and ignorant and didn't know anything. And he didn't even argue for Muhammad is in the Bible. He just said, Daniel 2 and Matthew 22, I win. Like, which not even talking about prophets. Like, he wasted all his time because he's not good with time management. So he wasted all his time ranting about Christianity. Couldn't refute my arguments. When he realized I knew too much about Daniel, he panicked and tried to deviate from that topic. Even though throughout the year that's been his favorite.
You might want to have an argument, a debate specifically on Daniel 2 and Daniel 7.
Oh, I'm not debating him unless he starts acting like I already cooked him. If he wants another debate, I mean, it's kind of just him saying he knows he does bad and he needs to redeem himself. But he's also very immature. I don't really feel like that headache again. I cooked him once. That's good enough.
Dual nature, just an excuse, a pass to cherry pick. Look for any excuse to cherry pick. God's chosen ones fighting for his kingdom. Thank you, brothers, for your wisdom. May he protect you and your family. Love you guys. Thank you. IP, can we get your notes on this book? Yeah, he's pointing that out repeatedly. You have to, email you is the best? Email you and ask for it's the best?
Just email me and I'll get you a document of all the notes on there and then you'll be good to go. Yeah.
According to Muslims, what was the purpose of Muhammad? What did they say Mo revealed or fulfilled or did that Jesus did not? No, it's just he's the final prophet with the final revelation. And as far as what Muslims believe, it's that, all the previous scriptures have been corrupted. So Muhammad was the only one who made it stick. According to what their actual book says, what's actually in the Quran, Muhammad's the seal of the prophets because everyone else already had their prophet. The Arabs were just last. And so once Muhammad had come along, now everyone's got their prophet and everyone's got their revelation that they're supposed to judge by. But Muslims now know none of the revelations don't line up, and therefore they have to explain it otherwise, or they'd be out of Islam. When are they going to apply this level of textual criticism and historical and exegetical investigation to their own scripture? Never. What a joke this is. Yeah. And IP, just as a little side project, we're going to have to do what they do to the Quran to argue that someone else is a prophet or that we're prophets or something else. You know what I mean? We're just going to have to do that throughout the year. Arguing that like AP is actually a prophet after Muhammad, and we'll use their method to argue that from the Quran and prove it. And
I like it. Fun. Let's do it.
Look at the name of Surah 30. Muslims basically have to believe Heraclius and the Byzantines are the Romans. Yeah. Truth becomes unmistakable when claims are tested against evidence, contradictions are exposed, belief systems that rely on them collapsing. Let's see. It'd be fun to get Metatron to react to this topic. I've seen that name.
Muhammad
I'm not familiar.
Yeah, he's a big YouTuber.
Why did you let the Florida lawyer get away with so many false claims at DebateCon? You should have brought Bob of Speaker's Corner. What do you
because we were debating a topic and he just kept going off topic. So I was sticking to the actual topic and he couldn't even defend that.
Do you think you could argue that the Catholic Church absorbed the Roman Empire, so the Roman Empire never fully fell?
That is a view of a lot of Catholics for sure. You could. I mean, it depends on how you're interpreting Daniel and what you're doing with all that. So I've seen some Catholics actually argue the stone is like the Roman Empire, and that's set up during, because they'll say that the actual statue is Babylon, the Medes, Persia, and then Greece. Those are the 4 layers, and then the Rome is the stone, and then it becomes the Catholic Church. I'm not convinced of that. I know some other Catholics are not even convinced of that. So it depends on what you're doing or what you're trying to say here. It's possible. Yeah. That's the thing about prophecy. There's a lot of interpretations there. That's why I'm not keen on using it to argue as evidence for Christianity when we have such a good argument called the resurrection argument already.
I made a Dawah shuffle short. Please check it out. So that's on the Loaves of Bread channel. If you want to give D. Wood, Mike Winger, PTSD, bring up Lord of the Rings. Don't do that while Mike Jones is here, or alliances will be destroyed. The Quran, they quote the book from Daniel Hyde Kid and Jew. Yeah. Have any of you watched Nephthali's video titled Babylon to America? It talks about how the papacy is apparently the little horn filled with the Seventh-day Adventist view. Who do you think the horn is?
Yeah. So I put it in my notes. Again, I think it could either be Antiochus Epiphanes IV, depending on how you interpret the statue, or if you're going to take the Rome as the bottom part, I would say maybe Vespasian, because if you actually count from when the Republic really starts collapsing under Julius Caesar, you go the 10 rulers, you actually get a great lineup to Vespasian. So you have Julius Caesar, he's assassinated. Then you have Mark Antony, who's sort of ruling as a dictator after that. He's defeated by Octavian. Octavian becomes emperor. Then from there, so you have 3 there. Then you have Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero. Then you have the 3 of the Civil War. So you have Otho, Galba, and Vitellius. So that's 10. There's the 10 emperors right there, or the 10 rulers, sorry. And then Vespasian comes, puts down 3 of them in that Civil War. So that all lines up quite well. So that's a possibility as well. But again, I'm not nailed to any of this. There's many possibilities.
Didn't the Roman Empire fall in a temporal sense in 476? That's when the last Roman emperor fell to the Germanic tribes.
Yeah, so this was the older view about 100 years ago or so, is that they said the Roman Empire ended in 476 when the western side collapsed, and then the eastern side was really the Byzantine Empire that was different. So that's what they say. Some like what I think we need to remember is that the eastern half was still the Roman Empire, and they still were sort of continuing on. They did evolve to become the Byzantine, so they were very different than the Romans of when it was the United Empire, for sure. Different language, different ethnicity. They just called themselves Roman. They were just Roman in name, really, at that point. But also, I mean, then that final collapse of the eastern half comes in 1204. What's left over is rump states. One of those rump states takes back Constantinople, and then the Ottomans come in, take over all of that, call themselves New Rome, claim to be the New Romans, and continue the empire that way.
Don't talk about those rump states around the men of Al-Zut. You should compile all the different translations they use and compile it into the new Islamic version. Yeah, you should go with all the translations they use for all these verses and put it all together. And then they'd have their go-to Bible, and they would say, "You see, this is the true uncorrupted Injil." Mike Winger may be a D1 cornball, but he's GOAT status. Yeah, at being a nerd in a cornball. I apologize if this already happened, but did IP share about that ex-Dawah teacher just got here? Yes, he did.
Yep. I got his email. I'm going to get back to him hopefully tomorrow morning, and depending on my workflow is, and we will get him rolling. We definitely want to support him in his growth. And, you know, the fact that what the Muslims did to him is horrible, the way they treated him. I don't want him to feel that way at all in Christianity. Because no one should feel that way, and so we should always strive to treat everyone.
We will destroy this white man.
You heard it here, folks.
Muhammad is human. Moses is human. You see, alhamdulillah, he is the prophet like Moses. That's about how good their arguments are. What do we say if Muslims say Muhammad killed a lot of people, but Muslims excuse it because it was during wartime and God, Old Testament, killed too? Well, if our criticism were simply Muhammad killed people in wars that he was fighting, that wouldn't be a deal breaker. He specifically was commanded to fight people who do not believe. He was commanded to violently subjugate the entire world. And that's different. That's different.
Also, guys, if anybody, like, people are messaging me on X, that might be a good way as well. You can always message me on X and I will send you a copy of my notes in a Word document or something. So you have it all there.
What about the main point? That it's not the same God? Allah is in no way Yahweh. Well, don't tell Cameron Bertuzzi that, or he might have some harsh words for you. Best case for Muhammad in the Bible. Oh, that was the whole comment. Best case, yeah. This is it. I'm Catholic. The Catholic Church did not absorb the Roman Empire. We would say the Catholic Church is the rock that becomes the mountain. It's clear that Daniel thinks the Medo-Persian is one.
And also, one of the things you gotta point out about that stone. So a lot of critical scholars will say that the statue of Daniel actually ends with Alexander the Great's empire. That's the iron at the bottom. So John J. Collins, for example, will argue that. So even if that's another possible view. So that's why I only brought up that other one as a possibility, that even if that one turned out to be right, I don't think that one is right. I do think the bottom is Rome, because I think there are some issues with that order, but I don't think it's a problem for Christians. I think we have different possibilities we can use, is what I'm saying. We're not stuck in the problem the Muslims are, where it has to be this Islamic caliphate and it has to come and destroy Rome, which it never did. So yeah.
And last one here, David, how do I contact you? I have an idea I want to run by you. Well, you can get my email address on my YouTube homepage. Just click on email. That will be my email. All right. That's all of them, man. Anything else you want to cover in there?
Nope. Yeah. Just I encourage all content creators to email me, get the Word doc with all my notes on it, and then you can line them up in the book, and then boom. So start knocking this stuff out. You can make as much videos, shorts, TikToks, you name it. Hey, there I am. Oh, look, there I am. Cool.
What's going on here?
I'm like the angel on your shoulder. An AP should be on your other shoulder. There we go. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, like
some dirty Turk on my shoulder.
Just saying, like, it'd be just make as many videos as you can, just exposing how bad this is, because it's bad. I mean, like they really, it's like we're playing baseball and like they just lob the slowest pitch ever, and they said you'll never hit that out of the park. Like, they made this incredibly easy for us. It just took time to go through, but I don't care. Anyone can use my notes, go through it, make videos, debunk this stuff. The more people doing it, the better. That's what I want to see. So yeah, knock it out. I apologize. I did not really have time to go through and spell check all my notes, so that you might get some spelling errors occasionally in there. I totally admit that. I didn't have any. I didn't have time to really go through that. I want to get this out as possibly as fast.
Shameful
as I could,
and unprofessional.
Totally. Yeah. That one Dawah guy will be like, "You see, look, he spelled the word wrong.
This
You
is
can't
the
trust him."
proof. This is the proof. Who could believe anyone who misspelled this word? Now convert to Islam, where our prophet is illiterate.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff we're dealing with.
All right, fun stuff. Hey, when you think you'll be starting video content, man?
So I'm going to the first thing I'm going to do is Daniel, because again, that has been their favorite argument all year. It's been their favorite argument. So I'm going to do a video on that, showing there's 3 reasons why Daniel 2 cannot be about Islam. That's what I'll do there as well. And then, I'll talk to Than. We'll try to think of some creative things. Also, we want to just put out some more videos on this whole idea that even if Muhammad is in the Bible, Islam is still false. So this is what they're doing is stupid and trivial. Like, they've wasted all this time and energy arguing Muhammad is in the Bible. Their entire argument is circular. So we're going to do some more videos on that. And then we'll just see what we want to go through from there. We'll just start knocking this out. But anybody who wants to get started on this, let's dive in. This is the roadmap. You guys have access to it now. Just let's hammer it out.
Not in the Zut sense, but hey, this would also be a good opportunity for some crossovers. Like I said, like if you have a topic where you're going in detail through their arguments and replies and stuff like that. If it's a situation where I'm going to be making just like a general video over the classic version of the argument, it can be a situation where I make like a 10 or 12 minute video going through like the way they've traditionally presented the argument. And then I say, but if you got the up-to-date version from Abraham fulfilled and you really think that's got some powerful responses to all of this, check out IP's video.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Link them together.
Well, we got a nice year to go start knocking this stuff out. But again, this is their go-to argument. This is the book they've been using. And it's awful. And if you just watched the debate I did with Libiano 2 nights ago, he so unprepared, only tried to use Daniel 2 and Matthew 22 to argue for Muhammad in the Bible. I mean, like, wow, that was bad. And then moment he realized I knew way too much about Daniel, he started running from it because he had no clue how to respond to me, and it showed.
Hey, last super chat. He says Muhammad in the Bible is in Leviticus 18:22. Al-Zutz and Muhammad. That's one. Don't lie with a man like you lie with a woman. Every time I see that reference, it reminds me. This was when I left jail and went to Southampton Correctional, Southampton classification, and it's a prison where they decide which prison to send you to. It's a temporary prison where then they decide. And there was a guy across the hall. I was yelling stuff down the hall, running my mouth at someone. And the guy across the hall, just a shredded dude with dreads hanging down and stuff like this. He, every time I'd be yelling something down the hall, he'd be, hey, you're a Christian. Why don't you follow this Bible verse? Why don't you follow this Bible verse? And it'd be Bible verses about, being kind and stuff. So guys, keep in mind, I converted to Christianity. I did not become this super awesome, super nice Christian dude just yet. That took a while. Anyway, so this is like maybe 2.5 months after I became a Christian. I'm there. And every time I'd be yelling, talking trash to someone, this guy'd be right across the hall quoting Bible. Say, hey, why don't you read this passage? And it's all just like, David, you're acting like a jerk. You shouldn't be and stuff. And so he did this one day and I go, hey, you got to quote Bible. Why don't you read Leviticus 18:22, buddy? Right. And, and he looked it up and he goes, what you mean by that? I go, what, I have to spell it out then? He's like, yeah, but I ain't come at you like that, man. I ain't come at you like that. Well, quit quoting Bible verses to me. Anyway, but it was cool because things like that would happen and I'd get ticked off at people in the moment and run my mouth. But afterwards I'd be like, yeah, he's right. I shouldn't be saying that stuff. Anyway, fun times, man. Fun times. I still don't know how I didn't get the crap beat out of me with how much I was running my mouth during those times. Anyway. All right, man. Well, hats off to IP for doing something I will probably never be able to do in my life. I do not think I could sit through that entire book. I will probably struggle to get through a single chapter of that complete nonsense with the purpose of making a video about a particular chapter and so on. So hats off to the people who can do all the work, put in all the work that if they weren't doing it, it might not even get done. So cool times. Be sure to follow Mike and Than over at Inspiring Philosophy. Everyone should be gearing up right now. Everyone's got to. As we're putting out content, keep in mind, the reason the Islamic Dilemma took off so much last year is because it wasn't just because people were putting out the arguments, it's that everyone started using it, right? Everyone, like just people in chats and people in the comment section, people on X and stuff like that all started using it to where they couldn't go anywhere. They couldn't go anywhere with their claims about the Bible without running into the Islamic dilemma. Gotta be the same thing. It can't just be IP or me or God Logic or anyone putting out some videos about Muhammad and the Bible. Everyone's got to start using the refutations and hunting these guys down on social media, wherever they're defending Muhammad and the Bible, and just need to show them we're not people aren't falling for this stuff anymore. And Islam, as far as Dawah and so on, it can only thrive in an atmosphere of ignorance. It's the only place it works, atmosphere of ignorance. So let's get rid of the atmosphere of ignorance and watch Dawah suffocate completely.
Yep.
All right, everyone. Catch y'all next time.